I was happy and making good money. You owe $30,000. I was shocked when my credit card company called me on the phone. What? There's no card? After that, I stopped the payment right away. My husband called me a million times while he was away. I got it all and did something about it. I am 29 years old, and my name is Haley. I work for a company now as a boss. Christopher is my husband. We met in college and are the same age. This year marks the 3rd year that we've been married. It seems like a lot of people around me quit their jobs when they got married, but I'm still writing this. I earn more money than my husband. We don't talk about it, but I worry about our future when my husband's only source of income is gone. I'm sure he does too. My husband, on the other hand, is not a pimp. We each have our own pocket, and we split the cost of living 50-50. I can spend the rest of the money however I want. This meant that I wasn't too unhappy with the fact that we were working together and that our lives were going well. Oh, I guess I spent a little too much this month too, I thought as I looked at the debit notice email on the train ride home. That being said, I should look again to see if any services I haven't used in a while are still set up. That's what I thought as I closed the email. That time will probably never come. I couldn't remember the password to get to the page where I could see my credit card bills. It's tough to find the drive. I can't get through to the help center. On the world's end, why should people who are working call the call center when it's only open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday? There's no doubt that the lines are long at lunchtime. I'm still signed up for a service, though, so I should be okay. In other words, the call center will call you if the monthly amount is more than $10,000. You're not wrong when you say that this confidence that everything will be okay has made me less likely to call the call center. But shopping online takes my mind off of work worries. When I opened the package and saw the package inside, I felt better, but only for a short time. I'm at home. As soon as I opened the door to the living room, my mood went from good to bad. There are socks on the ground and empty cans on the table. There was a phone and a sweater on the couch. No, is that my husband in a sweatshirt? Yes, my husband doesn't clean the house at all when he gets home. Instead, he is purposely destroying the house. I point my phone at the couch and say, "Hey, socks and empty cans." This is what I get. It's just a small thing to throw away and wash. Don't be so mad. You might do it. You could do it if you get home early. Why don't you clean the house or make me dinner? He said the next thing when I said S and say, I'm so tired when I get home. I also have to deal with the store's lunch bag. I'm tired too. I said with a shrug, if you don't clean the house, you should work and do the work or the chores, whichever you like better. Oh, please be quiet. I understand. And the fact that he said it twice showed that he wasn't feeling it. I gave my husband a mean look. My husband looked at his phone the whole time he left the living room and didn't even notice how I felt. It's not fair that I do more chores and work than he does. Is that a bad thought? I don't think so. But I'm not sure if I went too far. Because my husband is sometimes crazy, I was afraid he would get stubborn and make the house even messier. But contrary to what I thought, what I said that day seems to have made a difference. Yes, my husband has been coming home late ever since, even on days when I got home before him. He began to show up. It looks like he was working extra hours. He must have changed his mind. Because I was so happy, I worked harder than ever on my tasks. My husband is busy, so I have to clean the house. I didn't think about the fact that my husband was doing that at the time. Yes, it's Christopher's room. He hasn't cleaned it in a while, and that day I got home before my husband did. It had been a while since I had been in his room. As expected, there were a lot of empty bottles and cans lying around. Throw this stuff away. Oh, even on the bed. Then I looked at the bed and thought, what is this? There was a package wrapped in gift wrap. That bag was my favorite brand. I had to shine a light on it because I couldn't see it well. Oh, could it be my birthday present? Yes, my birthday was the following week, even though it hurt. I chose to act like I hadn't seen the package and leave it alone. But on my long-awaited birthday, the box never showed up. Hey, do you know what day it is today? Oh, it's your birthday, right? Yes. Did you forget? No, I remember, she said. Aren't you happy about something? Didn't I give it to you last year? What did you do? You know, you're old enough to be honored. My husband spit that out without a care in the world and went to his room. Then what do you mean? It was that box that made me feel uneasy from that day on. Right then, something took place. My husband said all of a sudden, "This is it. I'm going on a work trip to another country next week." What? A business trip to another country? Had to raise my voice. That's not how I remember your business being. You've never been on a business trip outside of the United States, let alone within the country, have you? Then my husband said, "They gave me this assignment because I've been doing well and deserve it." Oh, you mean? He told me I could believe him if I hadn't seen the box, but I couldn't accept what my husband said at that time. I was scared to go into his room on the day of his business trip after seeing him off early in the morning. I then checked under the bed. There wasn't a package there. I was sure. This isn't a business trip abroad, right? I was able to move my heavy body to work with this feeling in my heart. I was still not in a fit state to do any work, though. Several times, my hand stopped. I kept thinking about my phone and what my husband had said and done. "Hey, are you okay? What? You look like your mind is not in your body today," I asked. "Oh, yeah. I just didn't get enough sleep." As I made this light-hearted excuse, my phone started shaking. On the screen, a strange number was shown. It's not often that I answer a call from a number I don't know, but I had a bad feeling about this one, and did. "I'm sorry. I need to go for a while." "Yes, ma'am." I took the phone outside and hit the answer button. It was the credit card company's call center. I kept telling myself, "Oh no, it's not my husband, and oh well. I need to give out my password," and a lot of other things were all going through my mind at the same time. What the heck was the job requirement? The person who answered the phone gave me the answer right then and there. "This is our debt protection service calling because you have settled more than $10,000. $10,000. I was shocked by what I heard, but what the operator said next made me hold my breath even more. "Yes, it costs $30,000, I said. "That's not possible." "Wait a second." I quickly went back to work and looked in my wallet. It was no longer there. "That's the card I meant to put there," she said. I put my phone back in my ear. "Pardon me, may I halt that transaction?" "Yes. I think it's still true, so you can stop it." Thank goodness. It made me feel a little better. No, that's not the end of it. I kept going. "And please take care of the stolen card. Right now, I don't have my card with me." I said, "Yes, sir, I will do it right away." Even though I didn't understand, I did what the operator asked and was able to finish the process. I then hung up the phone. The heartbeat in my chest didn't stop for a while after I took the phone call. "I'm sorry, I'm not ready to talk. I'm not able to work. I'm sorry, but I need to go." Early, it seems my credit card was stolen and almost misused, and I've got a lot of things to deal with. I got off track and called my boss. I had a lot of worry at work, and my boss was okay with me leaving for the day. I grabbed the train quickly, and when I looked at my phone, I saw that my husband had called me a million times. It was like he was saying he was the bad guy. I ran home quickly. I quickly took off my shoes, set down my bag, and went to my husband's room. It was on his desk, so I opened it up and looked at the search history. The first thing on the list that caught my eye was a luxury cruise and a travel plan for two. I wasn't asked to go to that event. I looked at the destination and was sure it was the work trip my husband had talked about. He could no longer call it a work trip. I looked through my old emails. That's it. That's it. The name of the person is written there. Mario. What the heck is this woman? I was going to hit the keyboard out of anger, but instead I looked at what I thought was proof in a rough way. My phone wouldn't stop ringing while I checked. Oh my God, shut up. Oh yes, and while I'm at it, I'll use the password I got from the call center earlier to check my credit card usage history. I went to my page and looked through my records of uses. What? What is it? As I scrolled through, my mouth kept getting wider and wider. I forgot about a payment. After that, the money was paid for that brand of bag. Yes, it all made sense. In short, Christopher paid off his mistress Rio with my credit card and even took a trip abroad that he said was for work. Oh no, I don't want to boo. Boo. After several calls, I finally picked up the phone with all my might. What? You finally picked up after calling over and over. The credit card doesn't work. When my husband spoke, he was already talking about the card. Whose? When I asked him directly, he mumbled. You ask whose? Yes, but I don't have a credit card. That is, you took my credit card, right? My husband got antsy while I worked. No, that's not theft. I took it from someone. When you're abroad, it's easier to use than cash. When I'm on work trips, I use it for many things. Work trips. That's correct. What if it gets in the way of my work? It was meant to look like my husband was on a work trip, but I told him what I meant. What about a luxury cruise? What? Why do you want to know that? Well, that's business entertainment. A fun time for Rio? Why do you need to talk about Rio? Was she happy with the designer bag? What are you going to say? Did you just call Rio in a nice way? Do you really want to act like you don't know her? What? What do you want to say? I understand everything. I know that you tried to spend $30,000 on a luxury cruise and a vacation package for couples. I also know that you have been using my credit card to pay Rio a lot of money. My husband said twice, as if he wanted to start over. I understand. After I told him what I said. I'm sorry I cheated. I'm sorry, but I can't go home until you activate the credit card. Why are you acting that way? Do you think it will go away if you just say sorry and admit it? And friend, please spend the rest of your life at your resort. My husband was about to say something, but I hung up the phone instead. The phone started booing right away and kept booing. I turned off the call because it was too loud and making me crazy. Finally, the email said that the return trip would be at noon 3 days later. I called the company right away and decided that I would finish everything in 3 days. As a first step, I had to get everything out of the house. It was the second day that I told my in-laws what happened. Took the divorce papers and my husband's computer with me. When my in-laws saw my story and all the proof, they were angry. They said they were sorry and promised to get a divorce, pay me $113,000 in alimony, and return the money he had spent. Then, in no time, it was time for my husband to go back to Japan. I got a call early that evening from my in-laws telling me that our divorce papers had been received safely. To my surprise, my ex-husband had only taken the credit card and not any other money. The woman had given him $30,000 instead. As you might expect, she was very angry. She changed her ticket without permission before the return date and went back to Japan before him. I asked myself why she didn't just take the plane ticket and visa from my ex-husband and leave for Japan. While I was listening to the story, I thought about how when my ex-husband got back to Japan, my things were gone from my house and my phone wouldn't connect. So he ran to my in-laws' house. He got in a lot of trouble there and had to write divorce papers. In other news, The woman is now also asking for her $30,000 back, and the ex-husband is rolling his eyes up into his head. After he paid them back once, they made him live like a junior high school student with a 20-hour curfew while they watched over him until he paid the whole amount back. I finally made a $9,000 claim against the cheating wife after getting information from my in-laws about what had happened and how to reach them. This ended the problem. When I went back to work the next day, many of my bosses and coworkers were worried and called me. "Hey, are you okay? I'll listen to the story if it's okay with you. Say thank you. I'm thankful to work for such a friendly company. Every once in a while, I'll buy you a drink. Let's get a drink. It's really just a game of whining. Thanks a lot." As I drank the beer, I poured all of the past into the center of my mind. I love it. From now on, it looks like only good things will happen. Yes, that's right. Haley.
My name is Emma, and I'm 30 years old. I work for a manufacturing company here in Chicago, a job I landed after graduating from a prestigious university. I'm proud of my achievements and the financial stability I've built. But what's the point of financial success if it's accompanied by a constant, heavy strain on your personal life? That's my story, how I found myself supporting not just myself, but also my husband, Jake, who, at 33, still hadn't managed to hold down a stable job. Jake and I have been married for nearly 5 years. We met in college, and while we shared many dreams and ambitions, life hasn't turned out as smoothly as we had hoped. Jake had a promising start with a stable job after graduation, but things took a turn for the worse when he had a conflict with his boss. The clash wasn't entirely Jake's fault. The boss was notorious for being difficult. Still, Jake's decision to quit was a blow to our finances and to his confidence. Since then, finding and keeping a job has been a struggle for him. For the past year, Jake has been job hunting without success. He's tried various part-time jobs, but he's quick to quit whenever something doesn't meet his expectations or if he faces a minor conflict. It's as though he's searching for an escape rather than a solution. I've tried to be supportive, understanding that his past experiences might be affecting his job search, but it's wearing me thin. His unemployment is not just a financial burden, it's a strain on our marriage. The turning point came unexpectedly. Last month, Jake came to me with excitement in his eyes. "Emma, I've got big news," he said, his tone brimming with enthusiasm. "What's up?" I asked, hoping for something positive. "Well, my parents are celebrating Dad's retirement, and I've decided to take them on a trip to Italy to celebrate. I'm going to use the Freedom credit card," Jake said, mentioning the card I use for work and personal expenses. I was taken aback. "The Freedom credit card? Jake, that's not a small expense. Have you discussed this with me?" "No need to worry. It's all sorted. I've already planned the trip and booked the flights," he replied nonchalantly. My heart sank. "Jake, we've talked about our finances. You can't just use the credit card without discussing it first. And considering our current situation, this doesn't seem wise." Jake brushed off my concerns. "It's going to be a great trip. I've got it covered." Days later, I received an alarming call from the credit card company. "Hello, Mrs. Harris. We noticed some unusual activity on your Freedom credit card. It seems there's been an attempt to use it for a transaction that's been declined." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What transaction?" The representative explained that the card had been blocked due to suspicious activity and would soon be replaced with a new one. I realized the card Jake used was no longer valid. When Jake came home that evening, I confronted him. "Jake, I need to talk to you about the credit card. It's been blocked." Jake's face went pale. "What? That can't be right. I've already told my parents we're going on this trip. How am I supposed to pay for it?" "Exactly my point. You used my credit card without permission, and now it doesn't work. What's your plan now?" I asked, trying to keep my frustration in check. Jake looked increasingly anxious. I don't know. I thought it would work. That's not the issue, Jake. You've repeatedly made decisions without considering the consequences. This is just another example of how your lack of responsibility is affecting us. The next day, I received a call from Olivia, Jake's mother. Emma, I'm so sorry about Jake's actions. He told us about the trip, but we had no idea he used your credit card without asking. It's more than just using the credit card, Olivia, I said, feeling the weight of frustration. Jake has been struggling with employment and making poor financial decisions. This trip was just the tipping point. Olivia sounded genuinely concerned. We're worried about him too. We thought this trip would be a good distraction, but it seems it's caused more problems. I'll have a talk with him. As I hung up the phone, I realized that this situation wasn't just about the trip or the credit card. It was about the larger pattern of Jake's behavior. He's been avoiding responsibility for so long that it's now affecting every aspect of our lives. Later that evening, Jake came to me with a pained expression. I know you're upset, Emma. I should have talked to you first. I just wanted to do something nice for my parents, and I thought it would be a good way to celebrate. I understand wanting to do something special for your parents, I said, but the way you handled it was irresponsible. We need to address this issue, not just the trip, but the underlying problem. You've been avoiding your responsibilities for too long. Jake looked at me with pleading eyes. What are you saying, Emma? I took a deep breath. Jake, I think we need to talk about our future. This pattern of behavior is not sustainable. We need to find a solution before it's too late. As I spoke, I felt a sense of dread. The weight of our issues felt heavier than ever. I knew this conversation would be a turning point, but I wasn't sure how it would end. All I knew was that we were at a critical juncture in our marriage, and something had to change. After that conversation with Jake, things felt more strained than ever. It was clear that the issues between us were deeper than just a financial misstep. The trip to Italy was merely a symptom of a much larger problem, Jake's persistent irresponsibility and my growing frustration with it. Over the next few days, Jake's demeanor was subdued, and he avoided talking about the trip. I tried to keep things as normal as possible, but the tension in our home was palpable. I focused on work, hoping that immersing myself in my responsibilities would provide some relief from the stress at home. But every day, the weight of Jake's behavior felt heavier. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Jake walked in looking more anxious than usual. Emma, we need to talk, he said, his voice shaky. I put down the spatula and nodded. All right, what's on your mind? I've been thinking about what you said, Jake began, shifting nervously from one foot to the other. Maybe I should look into getting some financial counseling or career advice. I know I haven't been handling things well. I could see the effort he was making, and part of me wanted to believe that he was finally taking responsibility. That's a start, Jake. But it's not just about seeking help. It's about changing your approach and making a commitment to it. I know, he said, sounding more honest. I've also decided to cancel the trip to Italy. I spoke to my parents, and they understand the situation. I'll figure out another way to make it up to them. While I was relieved that he canceled the trip, a nagging concern remained. Jake's tendency to make promises without following through was troubling. I needed more than words. I needed to see real change. A few days later, I got a call from Olivia, Jake's mother. Emma, I just wanted to check in and see how things are going. I heard Jake canceled the trip, and I wanted to offer my support. Thank you, Olivia, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's been a rough few days. I'm glad Jake decided to cancel the trip, but the issues between us go beyond that. We need to address the bigger picture. I understand, Olivia said sympathetically. Jake has always struggled with responsibility. I'm afraid his father and I have tried to help, but it seems like he's got to find his own way. Our conversation ended on a somber note, with Olivia expressing her concern but also acknowledging that Jake needed to take more responsibility for his actions. I appreciated her support but knew that the real work lay ahead. As the days turned into weeks, Jake's behavior showed slight improvement. He started attending job interviews and sought out career counseling, as he had promised. However, old habits were hard to break. He still seemed to lack the motivation and follow-through needed to secure a stable job. One night, as we sat together in our living room, I decided to address the issue directly. Jake, I see you're making an effort, but it feels like we're stuck in a cycle. You make promises, but then things don't change. What's really going on? Jake sighed deeply, looking away. I know I've let you down. I'm trying, but it's hard to stay motivated when I keep facing rejection. I feel like a failure. His confession was raw and painful. I understood the emotional toll of constant rejection, but I also knew that our situation couldn't improve without real, tangible changes. Jake, I get that it's tough, but we need more than just trying. We need a clear plan and commitment to seeing it through. I can't carry this burden alone. Jake nodded slowly, but there was a sadness in his eyes that worried me. I'll try harder, Emma. I don't want to lose you. His words were hopeful, but my doubts remained. I needed to see consistent effort and results, not just promises. The situation felt like a fragile balance, teetering on the edge of a precipice. As the weeks continued, I found myself increasingly questioning our future. I wanted to believe in Jake's potential for change, but every failed job search and half-hearted effort made it harder to stay optimistic. The strain on our marriage was taking a toll on my well-being. One evening, as I sat alone in the quiet of our apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were reaching a breaking point. I had hoped that Jake's recent attempts would lead to real change, but the ongoing pattern of disappointment was wearing me thin. I knew that a crucial decision lay ahead. The future of our marriage depended on whether Jake could truly change or if I would have to face the reality that our relationship might be beyond repair. The weight of uncertainty was almost unbearable, but I had to confront it. I needed to find a way forward, even if it meant making the hardest decision of my life. The situation came to a head sooner than I had anticipated. Despite Jake's best efforts, things were not improving as quickly as I had hoped. The financial strain continued to weigh heavily on us, and his ongoing job struggles seemed to drain the last bit of patience I had. Then, one evening, Jake came home with an excited look on his face. Emma, I've got great news, he announced, almost breathlessly. I set down the book I was reading, bracing myself. What's the news, Jake? I've decided to take my parents on a trip to Italy, he said, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. It'll be a great way to celebrate their retirement. I've already booked everything. I stared at him, stunned. Jake, what do you mean? We haven't talked about this, and you didn't consult me. How are we even going to afford this? Jake's expression faltered. I used your Freedom credit card. I thought it would be a nice surprise. My heart sank. You used my credit card without asking me? Jake, do you realize how irresponsible that is? We've been struggling with finances, and now you've committed us to an expense we can't afford. Jake's face reddened. I just wanted to do something nice for my parents. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. It's not just about the trip, Jake. It's about your repeated lack of responsibility. We've talked about this before. You can't just make decisions like this without considering the consequences. Jake's shoulders slumped. I didn't mean to upset you. I thought I was doing something good. I shook my head, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. The issue is not just the trip. It's the pattern of behavior that's been damaging our marriage. You make decisions without consulting me, and then I'm left to deal with the fallout. Later that evening, as I sat alone in the quiet of our living room, I felt a wave of hopelessness. I had tried to be patient and supportive, But Jake's continued irresponsibility was pushing me to the edge. The situation was becoming unbearable. The next morning, Jake's mother, Olivia, called me. "Emma, I just wanted to apologize for Jake's actions. I know he shouldn't have used your credit card without asking." "Thank you, Olivia," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I appreciate your concern. But this situation has been ongoing for a long time. Jake's behavior is affecting our marriage, and I'm at a breaking point." "I understand," Olivia replied. "We've tried to help Jake, but it seems like he's got to make these changes on his own. We're here to support you both in any way we can." The conversation left me feeling more determined than ever. Jake's actions had pushed me to reconsider our future. It was clear that the pattern of irresponsibility was not something that could be easily fixed. I needed to make a decision about our marriage, and the time had come to face that reality. That evening, I sat down with Jake. "We need to talk," I began, my voice steady but firm. "I've been patient, and I've tried to support you, but your actions have made it clear that we have a serious problem. We need to address this now." Jake looked at me with a mix of worry and confusion. "What are you saying?" "I can't continue like this," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "I've reached a point where I have to consider what's best for both of us. Your repeated lack of responsibility and the strain it's putting on our marriage has reached a critical point." Jake's face fell, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He had been given countless chances, but the pattern of behavior remained unchanged. The next steps in our relationship would determine the future, but I knew that something had to give. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air, and as I looked at Jake, I realized that the future of our marriage was now hanging in the balance. The days following our confrontation were tense and filled with uncertainty. Jake was clearly distraught by our conversation, and the weight of what had transpired began to sink in. The night after our talk, he sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the floor. The room was heavy with unspoken words, and I knew we had reached a turning point. The next morning, Jake's mother, Olivia, called me again. "Emma, I wanted to talk to you about the situation," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "Jake is devastated. He's been struggling, and I think he's finally starting to realize the impact of his actions." "I understand, Olivia," I replied, my voice tired but resolute. "But I've reached a point where I have to think about my own well-being. This isn't just about Jake anymore. It's about the life I need to lead for myself." Later that day, Jake came to me with a look of resignation. "Emma, I've been thinking about what you said. I realize I've made a mess of things, and I don't want to keep dragging you down." I could see the sincerity in his eyes, but the damage was already done. "Jake, I've given this a lot of thought. I need to focus on myself now. The stress and disappointment from your actions have taken a toll on me, and I can't continue living like this." Jake nodded, his face a mix of sadness and acceptance. "I understand. I've been given so many chances, and I haven't taken responsibility. I guess this is what I've brought on myself." It was a painful realization, but it was the right decision for both of us. The following days were a whirlwind of legal paperwork and discussions with our families. My decision to file for divorce was final, and I hoped that this step would lead to a more stable and fulfilling life for both of us. When the divorce was finalized, a wave of relief washed over me. I felt lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted. The constant stress and uncertainty were gone, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of freedom. My life was no longer overshadowed by Jake's irresponsibility, and I could focus on my own happiness and well-being. Jake, meanwhile, faced the consequences of his actions. Without the support he had been used to, he was left to navigate his own path. I hoped that this would prompt him to take the responsibility he had long avoided, but I knew that was ultimately up to him. As I moved forward, I began to rediscover the joy and freedom that had been obscured by years of stress. My career flourished, and I found comfort in the stability that had once seemed so distant. My friends and family supported me through the transition, and their encouragement helped me rebuild my life. Reflecting on the past, I realized that the end of my marriage, while painful, was also a necessary step toward a better future. The strain of financial and employment issues had taken its toll, but it also highlighted the importance of mutual support and responsibility in a relationship. In the end, the story of my marriage with Jake became a chapter of learning and growth. It taught me the value of standing up for myself and the importance of making difficult decisions for my own well-being. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I felt confident that it was leading me toward a brighter, more fulfilling future. I'm Luna, a 28-year-old small business owner living in Chicago. I've decided to share my story, hoping it might resonate with others who've faced similar challenges. This journey began 3 years ago, and though I've found some resolution, the emotional impact lingers. Let me take you through the pivotal moments of my life with Ryan, my now ex-husband, and the turbulent times we endured. I first met Ryan through mutual friends, and our connection was instant. He was charming, wealthy, and lived a life of luxury. Our relationship was vibrant and filled with joy. Ryan's affluence allowed him to be incredibly generous, showering me with gifts and making me feel cherished. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. We dated for 3 wonderful years before tying the knot. Ryan's financial stability meant he was always the one treating me to lavish dinners, designer clothes, and extravagant trips. While I appreciated his kindness, I often felt uneasy about the imbalance in our financial contributions. My salary from my small business wasn't anywhere near what Ryan made, and though he insisted it was normal for him to spoil me, I couldn't shake off the feeling of inadequacy. When we decided to move in together, Ryan reassured me that he had inherited a house from his family, so there was no need to worry about rent. Instead, we agreed to split the other expenses equally. I was both relieved and nervous. I wanted to contribute fairly, but was unsure if I could keep up with his lifestyle. Ryan's confidence in our arrangement, coupled with his generous nature, eventually put me at ease. Our first major challenge came when I had to meet Ryan's family. He was busy with work commitments and couldn't join them, so I was left to host his parents and sister on my own. Ryan had warned me about his family's judgmental tendencies, but I wasn't prepared for how uncomfortable their visit would be. Ryan's mother, Helen, was particularly harsh. From the moment they arrived at our Chicago home, it was clear she didn't approve of me. Her disapproval was palpable, and she wasted no time expressing it. "So you're the woman Ryan has been seeing?" Helen asked with a critical tone. "I must say, I didn't expect you to live in this house. Do you even contribute to the household expenses?" I tried to explain, the house is fully paid for, but we split all other bills evenly. I hoped to clear up any misunderstandings, but Helen quickly dismissed my explanation. "Just because the house is paid for doesn't mean you're not taking advantage of him. Remember, this is his house, not yours." The conversation grew increasingly uncomfortable as Helen and Ryan's father, Frank, continued to criticize me. Frank, though less vocal, seemed to share his wife's sentiments. Ryan's sister, Nina, who was married to a wealthy billionaire, also joined in the disapproval. Her disdain was apparent, and whenever I tried to engage her in conversation, she responded with irritation. Despite my efforts to bridge the gap, Nina only seemed interested in one-upping me with her tales of luxury. "I'm married to a billionaire," she'd say with a smirk. "It's a different world compared to this." The visit left me feeling isolated and disheartened. Ryan's lack of support was glaring. Whenever his family criticized me, he'd brush it off, suggesting that they meant well and that I was overreacting. This dismissal only compounded my feelings of discomfort. Months later, we planned an engagement party in New York. I was excited but apprehensive about how Ryan's family would react. Despite our agreement to split the expenses, his family's criticism of my spending continued. Helen's harsh comments about my expenditures only added to the growing tension. Ryan's failure to stand up for me during this time made me question whether our relationship could withstand the strain. At the engagement party, the atmosphere was strained. Helen's criticism was relentless, targeting everything from the cost of the party to my spending habits. "You shouldn't have splurged so much," she remarked sharply. "It's as if you're draining Ryan's account before you're even married. At this rate, you'll end up with a backyard wedding." Ryan didn't defend me. Instead, he seemed to align himself with his family's viewpoint. This made me feel even more alienated and unsupported. Despite our agreement to split the costs, the criticism from Ryan's family and his inability to stand up for me were deeply hurtful. The turning point came during a special dinner celebrating Ryan's recent promotion. We had planned a grand event to mark the occasion, hoping to lift our spirits after all the tension. I had arranged everything meticulously, wanting the night to be perfect. But as the evening unfolded, it became clear that the underlying issues were far from resolved. Helen took the opportunity during her speech to publicly humiliate me. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate Ryan's success," she began. "But it's unfortunate that his good fortune didn't extend to his choice of partner. It's clear that he's been supporting a leech, and it's a shame that he has to work so hard to maintain her lavish lifestyle." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I was devastated, feeling as though my worst fears had been confirmed. Ryan's agreement with his mother's accusations and his own remarks about his financial strain pushed me to my breaking point. The public humiliation was the last straw. The night of Ryan's promotion dinner was a pivotal moment, one that left me feeling utterly betrayed and humiliated. As Helen's words echoed in the room, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The term leech was harsh and cruel, and it wasn't just the insult that hurt, it was the fact that Ryan seemed to agree with her. The weight of that public humiliation became unbearable. After Helen's degrading remarks, I tried to keep my composure. I forced a smile and engaged in light conversation, but inside, I was crushed. Ryan, on the other hand, avoided eye contact and said little. The evening that was supposed to celebrate his success had turned into a showcase of how alienated and unsupported I felt. When we got home, I confronted Ryan. "How could you let your mother speak to me like that?" I demanded. My voice shook with emotion. "And how could you agree with her?" Ryan looked uncomfortable but offered a weak explanation. "I don't know what you want me to say, Luna. My family is, well, they are who they are. I can't always control them. But you could have stood up for me." I insisted. "You're my husband. I need you to defend me, not side with them." Ryan's response was dismissive. I didn't want to make things worse. "You know how my family can be." That night, I lay awake, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a disagreement. It was a deep-seated issue with no easy resolution. The support I had hoped for from Ryan seemed non-existent, and his alignment with his family's views only compounded my distress. The days following the dinner were tense. Ryan was distant and avoided discussing the incident. Instead, he buried himself in work, leaving me to navigate the fallout on my own. I tried to reach out to him, to talk through our issues, but each attempt was met with indifference. It was during this time that I sought solace from my mother. She had always been my rock, offering unwavering support through my life's ups and downs. I visited her in Denver, hoping that a change of scenery and some maternal comfort would help me clear my head. My mother listened patiently as I poured out my heart. "Luna, you don't deserve to be treated this way," she said gently. "I've always known you to be strong and capable. If you're unhappy, you need to take action. You can't let anyone, not even Ryan, make you feel less than you are." Her words were a balm to my wounded spirit. She encouraged me to think about what I truly wanted and reminded me of my worth. With her support, I began to seriously consider my options. Back in Chicago, I started taking concrete steps to address my situation. I began the process of divorce, though it was a difficult and emotional decision. The thought of ending my marriage was daunting, but the lack of support from Ryan and his family had become too much to bear. As I initiated the divorce proceedings, Ryan's behavior grew more erratic. He began to harass me, making the separation process even more challenging. His attempts to undermine my confidence and make me feel guilty for leaving only reinforced my resolve to move on. To escape the constant tension, I decided to relocate. I found a small, cozy house in Denver and began preparing for a fresh start. The move was both liberating and overwhelming. I was leaving behind not just a city, but a life that had become fraught with emotional turmoil. In the midst of packing up my belongings, I also made the difficult decision to resign from my job. My small business, which had been a source of pride and stability, needed my full attention. It was time to focus on nurturing it and rediscovering my independence. The separation was tough, and the harassment from Ryan continued to haunt me, but the support from my mother and the promise of a new beginning helped me persevere. The journey was far from over, but I felt a growing sense of hope and determination as I prepared to start anew. Starting over in Denver was both exhilarating and daunting. The change of scenery was a welcome shift from the oppressive environment I had left behind, but the reality of rebuilding my life was setting in. The process of divorcing Ryan was underway, and each step felt like a small victory in my journey toward reclaiming my independence. My new home, a quaint house on the outskirts of Denver, became my sanctuary. It was modest but cozy, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the house I had shared with Ryan. As I unpacked boxes and arranged my belongings, I felt a sense of empowerment. For the first time in a long while, I was doing something solely for myself. The separation from Ryan, however, was not without its difficulties. Despite the legal proceedings, he continued to harass me with phone calls and messages. His attempts to make me feel guilty were relentless, and he tried to undermine my confidence at every turn. But instead of succumbing to his tactics, I found strength in my new surroundings and the support from my mother. My business, which had been a side project while I was married, became my main focus. I threw myself into it, dedicating long hours to make it thrive. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but I was determined to succeed. Each milestone, no matter how small, felt like a personal triumph. I could feel the seeds of my independence taking root. One afternoon, as I was working on a new project, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello. Luna, it's Nina," came the cold voice on the other end. I had not expected to hear from her. Nina, Ryan's sister, had always been particularly critical of me. Her tone was dismissive. "I just wanted to let you know that Ryan is falling apart. His career is taking a hit, and his personal life is in shambles." I listened quietly, my emotions a mix of vindication and indifference. "Is that so?" "Yes," Nina continued. "I thought you should know. I don't expect you to feel sympathy, but I thought you'd be interested." I ended the call and shook my head. The family's drama was no longer my concern. My focus had shifted to my own recovery and growth. I didn't need their validation or their interference in my life. The new chapter was filled with small victories. My business began to gain traction, and I started to feel a renewed sense of purpose. I even began to explore dating again, cautiously opening my heart to the idea of new relationships. It was a process of rediscovering who I was and what I wanted from life. One evening, while attending a local networking event, I met someone who seemed genuinely kind and supportive. His name was Alex, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. We shared similar interests and values, and he seemed genuinely interested in me as a person, not just as a potential partner. It was a refreshing change. As weeks turned into months, I continued to rebuild my life. The harassment from Ryan eventually subsided, and the legal aspects of the divorce were finalized. I felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. I had faced countless obstacles and emerged stronger and more self-assured. Reflecting on my journey, I realized how far I had come. The toxic environment I had once been trapped in was behind me. I had taken control of my life, focusing on my business, my well-being, and my future. The emotional scars remained, but they served as reminders of my resilience and growth. In Denver, I found not only a new home but also a renewed sense of self. I learned to value my own worth and to seek out relationships and opportunities that aligned with my values and goals. My story was one of overcoming adversity and embracing the possibilities of a new beginning. As I looked out at the city lights from my new home, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face it with the strength and independence I had fought so hard to achieve. As the months passed, Denver became more than just a place I had moved to. It became a symbol of my transformation. My new life was far from perfect, but it was mine, and that realization was a profound source of strength and satisfaction. My business had grown beyond my expectations. What started as a small side project was now thriving, and I felt a deep sense of pride in what I had achieved. The long hours and sleepless nights were paying off, and my financial stability was more secure than ever. I had learned to balance work and personal life, allowing myself time to rest and enjoy the small pleasures that I had once overlooked. One crisp autumn afternoon, I received a message from my mother. She wanted to visit me in Denver, and I was thrilled at the prospect. Her support had been unwavering throughout my ordeal, and I was eager to show her the new life I had built. Her visit was a mix of celebration and reflection. We spent time exploring the city, reminiscing about the past, and discussing my plans for the future. During her visit, I invited Alex to meet her. The introduction went well, and Alex's genuine kindness was evident. My mother could see how much he respected and cared for me. It was a comfort to have her approval, but more importantly, it reinforced my belief that I deserved a partner who valued me for who I was. One evening, as we sat on the porch enjoying a quiet moment, my mother said, "Luna, I'm so proud of how far you've come. You've turned a difficult situation into something beautiful. It takes incredible strength to do that." Her words were a balm to my soul. I had spent so long doubting my worth, and hearing her affirm my journey was deeply validating. I had been through so much, and yet, here I was, standing tall and ready to embrace the future. Life continued to unfold in new and exciting ways. My business expanded, and I took on new projects that challenged and inspired me. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. Each day brought new opportunities and experiences, and I embraced them with open arms. Alex and I grew closer, and our relationship deepened. He supported my ambitions and shared in my joys and challenges. Our connection was built on mutual respect and understanding, something I had longed for and finally found. As we navigated our relationship, I felt a sense of hope and optimism that had been absent for too long. Despite the positive changes, there were moments of reflection. I occasionally thought about Ryan and his family and the impact they had on my life. But instead of dwelling on the past, I chose to focus on the present and the future. The lessons I had learned were valuable, and I used them to guide my decisions and relationships. The journey to self-discovery had been painful but enlightening. I had learned to value my own worth, to stand up for myself, and to seek out relationships that were supportive and fulfilling. My story was no longer defined by the struggles I had faced, but by the strength and resilience I had discovered within myself. As the year drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the progress I had made. I was living a life that aligned with my values and dreams. The emotional scars from my past were still there, but they no longer held power over me. Instead, they served as reminders of my strength and my ability to overcome adversity. With each passing day, I felt more confident in my new life. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it with all the promise and possibilities it held. I had faced challenges and emerged stronger, and I was determined to continue growing and exploring the opportunities that lay ahead. As I looked out over the Denver skyline, I felt a profound sense of peace. My journey had been one of transformation and self-discovery, and I was grateful for the strength and resilience that had carried me through. The new dawn was not just the start of a new chapter, it was the beginning of a life I had fought so hard to create. And with that, I looked forward to the future with hope, optimism, and a renewed sense of purpose. I never imagined that a life that once felt so full could turn into one of endless dissatisfaction and pain. My name is Karen, and this is the story of how I came to realize that happiness isn't something you can hold onto when it's slipping through your fingers. I'm 48 years old, working as an administrative assistant in a small office here in Houston, Texas. I love my job, but it's never been enough to shield me from the turbulence of my home life. My husband, Mike, who is 3 years older than me, used to be a confident man, but a recent demotion at work has turned him into a shadow of his former self. He's now a man who takes his frustrations out on the people he loves the most, me and our teenage daughter, Sarah. Mike's anger has been a constant presence in our home for months now. I often find myself walking on eggshells, trying to avoid any situation that might set him off. His temper can flare up over the smallest things, but what cuts the deepest are his harsh words about my weight. "Why can't you just control yourself?" he'll snap. "You've put on so much weight, Karen. It's embarrassing." These words are like daggers. I try to ignore them, hoping that he'll see how hard I'm working to maintain a sense of normalcy despite his attacks. I work hard, juggle responsibilities at home, and try to keep our family life as stable as possible. But every time he opens his mouth to criticize me, it feels like the ground beneath me shifts just a little more. Adding to the tension is my mother-in-law, Helen. At 74, she's still very much a part of our daily lives. She lives with us, and her presence is a constant reminder of my inadequacies. Helen has her own way of making me feel like a failure, often wrapped in what she pretends is concern for my well-being. "Karen, are you really going to have that second serving?" she'll ask, her voice laced with a patronizing edge. "You know, you should be more mindful of what you eat." These comments come from a place of judgment rather than genuine concern. Helen's disapproval is always thinly veiled, and it only adds to the suffocating atmosphere in our home. Mike and Helen seem to be in agreement on one thing: I'm the problem. My daughter, Sarah, is the one bright spot in my life. At 16, she's perceptive and compassionate, and she can see through the pretense. She tries to stand up for me whenever she can, but it's hard for her to go against both her father and grandmother. She's a high school sophomore, and despite the challenges at home, she's managed to excel academically and maintain her kind-hearted nature. One evening, after another exhausting day at work and dealing with Mike's latest round of criticism, I came home to find Helen's critical gaze already waiting for me. The stress was mounting, but I tried to keep my composure. Dinner was supposed to be a time of normalcy, but it felt more like a battleground. Mike had come home late, which was unusual. He walked in with a smirk on his face, holding a bottle of wine spritzer. "I thought we'd celebrate making it through another day," he said, his tone oddly cheerful. I didn't think much of it at the time. We sat down at the dinner table, and as usual, Mike and Helen began their verbal jabs. My plate was filled with what I assumed was a standard dinner, but the way they watched me eat made me feel uneasy. As I took a sip of my wine spritzer, something didn't taste right. There was an odd, spicy aftertaste that lingered unpleasantly. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling only grew stronger. I looked over at Helen, who was sipping from her glass of wine as well. A knot tightened in my stomach. Something was off, but I couldn't pinpoint it. My heart raced as I watched Helen take another sip. I could see her face flush, her eyes widening in surprise. She started coughing, her discomfort evident. The spicy taste in my own drink now felt like it was setting my mouth on fire. "Are you all right, Helen?" I asked, trying to sound concerned. Helen's response was choked and unintelligible. Mike, however, looked on with a mixture of amusement and annoyance. It wasn't until Helen's coughing turned into a full-blown gagging fit that Mike finally made a move. "What did you do to the drink, Mike?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. Mike shrugged, a look of feigned innocence on his face. "Just thought I'd spice things up a bit. Didn't think it would be such a big deal." I knew then that this wasn't just a prank. It was a deliberate act of cruelty, a final push in the long line of abuses I had endured. The realization hit me hard. Sarah had been watching from the sidelines, her face a mask of shock and disappointment. Her support was my only comfort, but even that felt fragile in the face of Mike's increasing hostility. That night, I lay awake in bed, my mind racing. The spicy drink incident was the last straw. I needed to make a change for the sake of my own sanity and Sarah's well-being. But I didn't know how or where to begin. As I listened to the quiet, my thoughts were filled with the weight of what lay ahead. I needed to find the strength to confront this toxic environment. I needed to make a decision that would change our lives forever. And though I was scared, I knew I couldn't let fear keep me trapped in this cycle any longer. The next few days were a blur of tension and uncertainty. I was haunted by the memory of that evening, Mike's cruel prank, Helen's choking fit, and the heavy silence that followed. It was clear to me now. Our home was no longer a sanctuary but a battlefield where I was constantly under attack. I knew I couldn't let this go on any longer. The humiliation and emotional abuse had been building up for far too long. As I looked around our house, it felt more like a prison than a home. Every corner seemed to whisper reminders of the resentment and anger that festered within its walls. Sarah had been a beacon of support through all this, but even she was starting to feel the strain. I could see it in her eyes, the way she flinched at every raised voice and tensed whenever Mike was around. I wanted to protect her, to shield her from the harsh reality of our situation, but I wasn't sure how. One afternoon, after dropping Sarah off at school, I found myself sitting at my desk, the paperwork in front of me feeling like a mountain I couldn't climb. My mind was preoccupied with thoughts of escape. I had been quietly planning my exit, researching my options, and trying to figure out how to make a clean break. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. It was Sarah, calling from school. Her voice was strained, and I could tell she was upset. "Mom, can you come to school? I need to talk to you," she said, her voice cracking. I hurried to the school, my heart pounding with worry. When I arrived, Sarah was waiting for me by the front office. Her face was pale, and she looked like she had been crying. I wrapped my arms around her, trying to offer comfort. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice full of concern. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes filled with determination. "I overheard something today. Some kids were talking about how Mike is acting at home. They know he's been demoted and how it's been affecting all of us. I didn't want to say anything, but it's clear that everyone at school knows what's going on." I felt a surge of shame and anger. It was one thing to deal with our issues behind closed doors, but the thought of others knowing our struggles made me feel exposed and vulnerable. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I never wanted you to be in this position." She shook her head, her expression firm. "Mom, it's not your fault. You've done everything you can. I just want you to know that I'm here for you. And I'm not going to let them get away with this." Her words were a balm to my frayed nerves. It was clear that Sarah's support was unwavering, and it gave me the strength to keep going. We talked for a while, and I could see the resolve in her eyes. She was ready to fight back, and so was I. Later that evening, as we sat down for dinner, the atmosphere was thick with unease. Mike was still trying to act normal, but his efforts felt forced. Helen was unusually quiet, perhaps still embarrassed by the incident with the spiked drink. Mike finally broke the silence, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "So, Karen, have you decided how you're going to handle your little problem? Or are you just going to keep avoiding it?" I looked him in the eye, refusing to be intimidated. "I've decided that I can't live like this anymore. I've been planning to make some changes, and I'm going to start by standing up for myself." Mike's face darkened, and Helen's eyes widened in surprise. I could feel the weight of their judgment, but I stood my ground. I had made up my mind, and there was no turning back. That night, as I lay in bed, I prepared myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. I had gathered evidence of Mike's abusive behavior and Helen's unkindness, preparing to present it to Mike as part of our separation process. I was ready to fight for a future where Sarah and I could be free from this toxic environment. The realization hit me. I was no longer a passive participant in my own life. I was taking control, and that was a powerful feeling. I had to stay strong for Sarah and for myself. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. The days that followed were tense. Every morning, I woke up with a mixture of dread and determination. I knew that things had to change, but I also knew that facing Mike and Helen would be difficult. The atmosphere in our home was thick with unspoken anger, and I could feel the pressure building. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, I could sense that something was off. Mike's mood was darker than usual, and Helen seemed unusually quiet, as if she was bracing for something. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew that tonight could be the night when everything came to a head. Mike was unusually quiet as well, only breaking the silence to make snide remarks about my cooking. His comments were thinly veiled attacks, designed to provoke me. I kept my responses short, trying to maintain my composure. As the meal progressed, Mike suddenly announced, "I thought we could have a little celebration tonight. I made a special drink for everyone." He reached for a bottle of wine spritzer from the fridge and poured generous amounts into glasses. The scent of the drink was faintly spicy, but I didn't think much of it. I was preoccupied with the growing tension between us. Helen, who had been mostly silent, took her glass and sipped it without comment. I noticed her wince slightly, but I assumed it was just the spiciness of the drink. We continued eating, trying to make small talk despite the strained atmosphere. As Helen started coughing and gasping for air, I felt a wave of panic. Her face turned red, and she struggled to speak. It was clear that something was terribly wrong. "Helen, are you okay?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. Helen could barely respond, but I saw the look of realization in her eyes. She knew that the drink was to blame, just as I had begun to suspect. Mike's face was a mask of feigned innocence, but I could see the glint of satisfaction in his eyes. In the chaos that followed, I quickly switched my drink with Helen's when she wasn't looking. The spicy concoction had been intended for me, but it seemed that Mike's plan had backfired. Helen's distress led to a dramatic scene. The dinner ended abruptly as she was rushed to the hospital, leaving Mike and me alone in the house. The silence that followed was heavy with unresolved tension and unspoken accusations. Once the house was empty, I took the opportunity to confront Mike. I was shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. Mike, this has to stop. I've had enough of your cruel games and Helen's harsh comments. I can't live like this anymore. Mike's reaction was defensive and angry. You're just overreacting, Karen. It was a harmless prank. You always blow things out of proportion. His dismissive attitude was the last straw. I had reached the breaking point. I knew I had to act, not just for my own sake, but for Sarah's as well. I had been preparing for this moment for weeks, gathering evidence of Mike's behavior and preparing divorce papers. The next morning, as Sarah and I prepared for the day, I took a deep breath and handed her the divorce papers. Her eyes widened in shock, but I could see the relief behind her concern. "Mom, is this really happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound as reassuring as possible. "It's time for us to move on. We need to get out of this toxic environment and start fresh." Sarah hugged me tightly, and I could feel her support bolstering my resolve. We began making plans to move to my parents' house, where we would find the stability and care we desperately needed. That evening, I finally told Mike about our decision. His reaction was one of anger and disbelief, but I stood firm. "I'm leaving, Mike. I can't be part of this anymore. I've filed for divorce, and there's nothing you can do to change my mind." Mike's face turned a dark shade of red, and he stormed out of the room. The house was filled with a sense of finality. The decision was made, and there was no turning back. As Sarah and I packed our things, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. It was a new beginning, but it was also a daunting change. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew that leaving Mike and Helen behind was the only way to find peace and happiness. The move to my parents' house was a huge relief. Their home in Houston was a world away from the chaos and toxicity of my old life. As soon as we arrived, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. My parents welcomed us with open arms, and the warmth of their support was a stark contrast to the coldness we had left behind. My mom and dad were understanding and attentive. They did their best to make Sarah and me feel at home, providing a safe space where we could begin to heal. My dad, always the practical one, helped us settle in, while my mom took charge of making sure we had everything we needed. I finalized the divorce from Mike within a few weeks. The legal process was draining, but having my parents and Sarah by my side made it bearable. Mike continued to struggle both professionally and personally. He was left behind with Helen, who, despite reaching out to us occasionally, was now facing the reality of her actions. I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice in the way things unfolded, though I remained focused on moving forward rather than dwelling on the past. The days in my parents' house were filled with a new kind of routine. I began to rebuild my life from scratch. I had to find a new job, and thankfully, my previous employer reached out with an offer to return. It was comforting to know that my professional life could offer some stability, especially after everything I had been through. One unexpected and positive turn of events was meeting a new, understanding person in my life. My boss, who had always been kind and supportive, expressed a deeper interest in me. His name was David, and he was different from anyone I had known before. He respected my efforts and saw me for who I truly was, someone deserving of kindness and love. David and I started seeing each other outside of work, and our relationship grew steadily. He was patient and understanding, offering me a safe space to share my experiences without judgment. With him, I felt a genuine connection and a sense of hope for the future. Sarah, too, was adjusting well to our new life. She thrived in the supportive environment of my parents' home and did well in her studies. Her resilience and courage were inspiring, and I was proud of the young woman she was becoming. We spent a lot of quality time together, doing things that made us both happy and slowly rebuilding our lives. Despite the new beginnings, there were occasional moments of doubt and fear about the future. It was natural to worry about what lay ahead, but I learned to embrace these feelings as part of the healing process. With the support of my parents and David, I found strength in focusing on the present and planning for a brighter future. Helen's attempts to reach out continued, but I remained firm in my decision to keep my distance. Reconnecting with the past would only bring back the pain I had worked so hard to overcome. My priority was to protect my well-being and that of my daughter. As time went on, the scars from my previous life began to heal. I was no longer the woman who had endured emotional abuse and felt trapped. I was stronger, more self-assured, and ready to embrace a new chapter. My relationship with David grew deeper, and we began to discuss our future together with optimism. The journey had been long and arduous, but it led me to a place where I could finally find happiness and peace. I realized that resilience wasn't just about surviving the difficult times, but also about having the strength to rebuild and move forward. Looking back, I understood the importance of self-respect and support systems. They had been my pillars of strength, helping me to stand tall and make the decisions that changed my life for the better. My story was a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of knowing one's worth. As I closed this chapter of my life, I felt a renewed sense of hope and a readiness to face whatever came next. With Sarah by my side and a future filled with promise, I embraced the journey ahead with confidence and optimism. My life had transformed, and I was finally on the path to finding true happiness and fulfillment. My name is Sandra, and I'm a 19-year-old college student living in Seattle. My story, though it may seem like an ordinary tale at first glance, is anything but that. It begins with the death of my father and an inheritance that would change everything. When I was 13, my parents divorced. It was a painful and confusing time for me. My mother, Linda, did her best to shield me from the worst of it, but the emotional distance between us grew. Then, a few years later, my father passed away unexpectedly. He left behind a substantial inheritance of $10 million, which I could only access when I turned 19. It was a sum that promised financial security, but I had no idea how it would stir up trouble. By the time I reached 19, I had just begun to settle into college life, enjoying the freedom and new experiences it offered. Living with my mom and my stepfather, Ron, had become a routine. Ron had been married to Mom for 6 years, and though I had tried to get along with him, there was always a tension that hung in the air. One afternoon, while I was studying in my room, Ron knocked on my door. He looked unusually serious. "Sandra, we need to talk," he said. I put down my book and followed him to the living room. Ron sat down on the couch, his expression stern. "I know you've recently come into a significant amount of money from your father's estate," he began. "Your stepbrother, Jake, is in need of financial help for college. I think it would be best if you considered giving him a portion of your inheritance to help cover his tuition." The request took me by surprise. Jake, who was 21 and in his 3rd year of college, had never shown much interest in being part of my life. The thought of just handing over a portion of my inheritance seemed unfair and rash. I had worked hard to manage my own finances and was planning for my future. "I'm sorry, Ron," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I don't think it's fair for me to give Jake my inheritance. I've planned to use it for my own education and future needs." Ron's face reddened. "Sandra, you don't understand. It's not just about fairness. It's about family. We've been trying to support Jake, and this could make a huge difference for him." I shook my head. "I still don't think it's right. I need to think about my own future too." Ron's demeanor shifted from pleading to aggressive. "You're being selfish. This money was meant to help you, but you could use it to help your family. Don't make me force this issue." I felt a chill run down my spine. His words, and the way he spoke, were menacing. "You can't just tell me what to do with my inheritance. And I don't want to discuss this further right now." Ron's eyes narrowed. "Don't tell your mother about this conversation," he warned as I walked away. "It's between us." The unease that settled over me grew heavier. I couldn't shake the feeling that Ron's insistence on my inheritance was more than just concern for Jake's education. Something about his behavior seemed off. I decided to investigate. Late one night, when everyone was asleep, I quietly accessed Ron's computer. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I had to find out why he was so intent on my money. As I scanned through his emails, my heart raced with every new message I opened. My suspicion proved correct. I found emails between Ron and a woman named Carla, discussing not only their plans to divorce my mother, but also cryptic references to a shady business deal. My hands trembled as I read through the messages. They mentioned something about money laundering and potentially drug-related activities. The more I read, the more horrified I became. The next morning, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I knew I had to confront Ron and Jake. I needed to protect my inheritance and my mother from whatever Ron was planning. But how? I decided to record a conversation with them, hoping to gather evidence that would prove Ron's deceitful intentions. When Ron and Jake were in the living room, I walked in, trying to appear casual. "Hey, can I talk to you guys for a moment?" I asked. I subtly turned on my phone's recording feature as I took a seat. Ron seemed uncomfortable, but agreed. "What's on your mind, Sandra?" "I just want to understand why you're so adamant about me giving my inheritance to Jake," I began. "What's really going on?" Ron shifted in his seat. "Sandra, we've talked about this. Jake needs this money, and it's only fair." Jake nodded in agreement, though his face was expressionless. "Yeah, Sandra. It's not like we're asking for the whole amount." I kept pressing, trying to get Ron to slip up. "I've been doing some thinking. Maybe I should check things out more thoroughly before making any decisions." Ron's patience wore thin. "Sandra, you need to trust us. We're looking out for you." "I'm just trying to be cautious," I said, feigning innocence. "I'll think about it." As I left the room, I felt a sense of impending confrontation. I had enough evidence to raise serious questions. What I didn't know was how deep Ron's deceit went and what it would take to protect my family and my future. In the days that followed, I was consumed by worry. The conversation with Ron and Jake had left me feeling uneasy, but I knew I couldn't let it go. I needed to dig deeper. The recordings I had made provided no immediate proof of wrongdoing, so I decided to investigate further. While Linda, my mother, was away on a work trip, I found myself alone with Ron and Jake. It was a perfect opportunity to search through Ron's things, hoping to uncover more about his shady dealings. I spent hours sifting through files on his desk and searching his personal computer. One evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, I made my move. I returned to Ron's computer, which was left unattended. My heart pounded as I navigated through his email accounts and documents. I had hoped for something concrete, anything that would reveal Ron's true intentions. After some time, I stumbled upon a thread of emails between Ron and Carla. The messages were filled with coded language about transactions and cleaning up money. It was clear that Ron and Carla were involved in something illicit. The emails mentioned laundering money and hinted at connections to drug trafficking. The more I read, the more I realized the gravity of Ron's schemes. My hands shook as I copied the emails to a flash drive. I needed to have undeniable evidence, so I also took screenshots of key documents and financial statements linked to Ron's shady business. It was a risk, but I had to act quickly before Ron discovered I was snooping around. The next step was to gather more information about Ron's involvement with Carla. I decided to follow Ron one day when he claimed he was going to a business meeting. I trailed him discreetly, my heart racing with every turn. My intuition led me to an old warehouse on the outskirts of Seattle, a place that seemed out of place for a typical business meeting. From a distance, I saw Ron enter the building with a briefcase. I waited for hours, my anxiety mounting. When Ron finally emerged, he seemed more agitated than usual. I made a mental note of the warehouse's location and the time he left. The next morning, I confronted Jake. I knew he was involved in some way and needed him to reveal more about Ron's activities. "Jake, can we talk?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I need to know what's really going on with the inheritance." Jake looked at me with a blank expression. "We've been through this, Sandra. It's about helping the family." "I'm not sure I believe that," I said, pressing on. "I've been finding out more about Ron and Carla. There's something not right." Jake's face hardened. "Sandra, you're overreacting. You don't know what you're talking about." I didn't press further, but I noted his defensiveness. The conversation confirmed my fears. Ron had manipulated Jake as well. I knew that confronting Ron directly wouldn't work. I needed my mother to be involved to see the truth. I decided to gather all my findings and present them to Linda. But how would she react? She was away on a business trip, and I had to be careful about how I approached her. Finally, I managed to reach Linda via phone. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important. It's about Ron and the inheritance." Linda sounded concerned. "Sandra, I'm really busy with work. Can it wait until I get back?" "I don't think so, Mom. It's urgent," I insisted. "Please, just listen to what I have to say." Reluctantly, Linda agreed to a call later that evening. I gathered all the evidence I had, copies of emails, screenshots of documents, and notes from my surveillance. It was time to show her what I had uncovered. When the call came, I presented the evidence to Linda, speaking as clearly and calmly as I could. "Mom, I've discovered something disturbing. Ron and Carla are involved in illegal activities, including money laundering and possibly drug trafficking. Here's the evidence." Linda listened in stunned silence. "Sandra, I don't know what to say." "I know it's hard to believe," I said, "but I need you to look at these documents and see for yourself." Linda promised to review everything and get back to me. The waiting was agonizing, but I had done all I could for now. My mother's reaction would be crucial in determining the next steps. The truth was out there, but whether she would believe it was a different matter. The following days were filled with tension. I anxiously awaited Linda's response to the evidence I had sent her. I hoped she would see the truth in my findings and act on them. The weight of the situation was almost unbearable, and every time my phone rang, my heart leaped, expecting it to be my mother. One afternoon, Linda finally called. Her voice was tight with emotion. "Sandra, I went through the documents and emails you sent me. I can't believe it, but it looks like you're right. Ron and Carla are involved in some serious illegal activities." Relief and dread mingled in my chest. "What are we going to do, Mom?" "I'm hiring a private investigator," Linda said firmly. "We need to confirm everything before we take any action. I'll be back in Seattle soon." True to her word, Linda returned a few days later with a private investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Kate. Kate quickly got to work, examining the evidence I had gathered and conducting her own investigation. She followed Ron's activities and scrutinized the warehouse I had spotted. As the days passed, the tension in our house became palpable. Ron was increasingly suspicious of my behavior. He kept asking about my interactions with Linda and seemed on edge whenever he was around me. Jake, on the other hand, continued to act like nothing was wrong, though his demeanor was guarded. Linda and Kate's investigations soon bore fruit. Kate confirmed that Ron and Carla were indeed involved in money laundering and had ties to drug-related activities. Armed with this new evidence, Linda and I knew it was time for a confrontation. We planned our move carefully. One evening, we gathered in the living room with Ron and Jake. Linda, her voice steady despite her obvious anger, started the conversation. "Ron, Sandra, and I have discovered some things about your activities that we need to discuss." Ron's face hardened. "What are you talking about?" Linda calmly placed a folder of evidence on the table. We know about your affair with Carla and your involvement in illegal schemes. The private investigator has confirmed everything. Ron's face turned pale as he glanced at the documents. You have no proof. This is all nonsense. I have plenty of proof, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. And it's not just the documents. We know about the money laundering and the drug connections. Jake, who had been silent up to this point, finally spoke. Ron, is this true? Ron shot him a warning look. Jake, stay out of this. The tension was electric as Linda and I waited for Ron's reaction. He seemed to weigh his options, then his face twisted with rage. You think you can just accuse me and get away with it? You're the one who's been lying and manipulating us, Linda said. You're not going to get away with this. Ron's anger reached a boiling point. He stood up abruptly and advanced toward me. You should have stayed out of this, Sandra. I'll make sure you regret this. Before Ron could act on his threat, Kate, the private investigator, stepped forward and flashed her badge. Ron, we have enough evidence to have you arrested. I suggest you cooperate. Ron's bluster faltered as he realized the seriousness of the situation. This is a setup, he mumbled, but his bravado was gone. Linda, her eyes full of resolve, addressed Ron one last time. You have two choices. Turn yourself in, or we'll make sure the police get involved. Ron's face contorted with defeat as he realized the game was up. The confrontation had been intense, but now the next step was clear. The police would be notified, and Ron's fate would be decided. As Ron left the room, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt a surge of relief. We had taken a significant step toward justice, but the situation was far from over. The coming days would bring more challenges, but at least now we were on the path to exposing the truth and seeking justice. The confrontation with Ron marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, but it wasn't the end. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and personal turmoil. Linda and I worked closely with the authorities, providing all the evidence we had gathered. The situation felt surreal as we watched Ron's empire of deceit crumble. The day the police came to arrest Ron and Jake, I could hardly believe it. I stood in the living room, watching through the window as the police car pulled up. My heart raced as officers escorted Ron and Jake out of the house. Ron's face was a mix of anger and humiliation, while Jake looked stunned and confused. Linda and I had to stay composed throughout this process. We provided statements to the police and attended meetings with lawyers. The legal system moved swiftly. The evidence was overwhelming, and Ron's attempts to deny his involvement only made things worse. News of the arrest spread quickly, and soon, Ron was facing charges not just for money laundering and drug-related crimes, but also for his affair with Carla and the plans to divorce Linda under false pretenses. Linda and I were determined to stay strong. Despite the emotional toll, we knew we had to see this through. The courtroom drama was intense, but watching Ron being held accountable for his actions was a form of closure. The hearings were covered by local media, and it became clear that Ron's reputation was in shambles. He had gone from being a respected figure in the community to a cautionary tale about greed and betrayal. During the trial, Linda made the difficult decision to file for divorce. It was a painful process, but she knew she couldn't remain married to someone who had betrayed her trust in such a profound way. The divorce proceedings were finalized, and Linda felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It was a significant step toward reclaiming her life and moving forward. After the trial, the relief we felt was palpable. The nightmare was finally over, and Ron's criminal activities were exposed for all to see. Jake faced legal consequences as well, though his role was less significant compared to Ron's. He seemed to come to terms with the reality of his situation and accepted responsibility for his part in the scheme. With the legal battles behind us, Linda and I began to focus on rebuilding our lives. The trauma of the past months had brought us closer together. We spent more time together, talking about our hopes and dreams for the future. The bond between us, strengthened by adversity, became a source of comfort and strength. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to a new normal. Linda and I found solace in each other's company, and we worked on restoring a sense of peace and stability. We even began to make plans for the future, looking forward to a life free from the shadows of deceit and manipulation. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized how crucial it had been to stand up for the truth. Despite the fear and uncertainty, facing the situation head-on had led to justice being served. It wasn't just about the inheritance or the legal battles. It was about reclaiming our lives and ensuring that integrity triumphed over deceit. As we moved forward, Linda and I found joy in the simple things, our shared moments, our renewed trust in each other, and the promise of a brighter future. We were stronger and more resilient than ever, having faced the darkest aspects of our family dynamics and come out on the other side with our dignity intact. In the end, Sandra and Linda were not just survivors of a treacherous ordeal but symbols of resilience and the power of standing up against manipulation and betrayal. The journey had been arduous, but it taught us invaluable lessons about trust, integrity, and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. My name is Emma, and I'm 28 years old. I'm married to a kind and supportive man named Tom, and I'm expecting our first baby in a few months. Right now, we live in the heart of the Kansas countryside, where the fields stretch endlessly and the sky is always a brilliant blue. It's peaceful here, but our lives have been anything but. My father passed away last month after a long battle with illness. I had been his main caretaker during his final year, trying to ease his pain and keep his spirits up. I regret that I never had a chance to share the news of my pregnancy with him. The hospital visits, the phone calls, and the endless worry took their toll on me, but I wanted to make his last days as comfortable as possible. Our relationship with my sister, Sophia, had become strained. She's in her late 20s and lives in New York City with her husband, who is the CEO of a marketing company. Sophia always found it too difficult and expensive to visit, despite how much I needed her support. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it grew wider with each passing day. Sophia's absence was a constant reminder of her disinterest. I found myself alone in handling our father's illness, feeling both the weight of his condition and the burden of his care. It was hard not to resent her for not being there, for not offering more than empty promises and excuses. The day arrived when we had to gather to discuss our father's will. The tension in the room was palpable. Our mother, who is elderly and frail, sat beside me, her face a mask of quiet sadness. James, the lawyer who had handled our father's affairs for years, was present to guide us through the process. Sophia, always impeccably dressed, sat across the table, her eyes sharp and calculating. "Thank you all for coming," James began, his voice steady but sympathetic. "We're here to go over Mr. Thompson's will." Sophia's gaze was fixed on James, her impatience evident. "Can we just get to the inheritance? I have a meeting later." James nodded and started reading from the will. According to Mr. Thompson's instructions, the house and the land will be left to Mrs. Thompson. Our mother's face showed a flicker of relief. The old farmhouse, which had been our family home for decades, was finally secured for her. But the land had been rented out, not owned. The realization hit Sophia like a splash of cold water. "What about the rest?" Sophia asked sharply, cutting James off. James continued, "The savings and the storage shed will be divided between Emma and Sophia." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "I want the $300,000 in savings." "I'll take that." I was taken aback. "But that's not fair. I should get a share of the savings too." Sophia's tone was icy. It's what I deserve. You've had the house and the land, and I need that money to cover my expenses. Our mother nodded in agreement, her voice trembling. Emma, I believe you might find something valuable in the shed. It's been there for years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd spent so much time taking care of everything, and now Sophia was claiming the lion's share of our father's savings without a second thought. It felt like an insult to all the hard work and sacrifice. As the meeting concluded, Sophia left quickly, her designer shoes clicking on the wooden floor as she walked away. I was left standing in the quiet room with my mother and James, my frustration boiling beneath the surface. Emma, I'm sorry, James said gently. It's not an ideal situation, but it's how the will is structured. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. I'll deal with it. I just hope that shed holds something useful. I walked out of the room, my thoughts racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The shed had always been a mystery, filled with old farming tools and forgotten items. My father had never talked about it much, and I'd never thought to question its contents. The drive back to our countryside home felt long and lonely. Tom was waiting for me, his expression full of concern. How did it go? He asked as I walked in. It was tense, I replied. Sophia took all the savings. I'm left with the shed. Tom frowned. I'm sorry. It's not fair. I know, I said, feeling a pang of frustration. But I have to check out the shed. Maybe there's something of value there. That evening, I stood in front of the old shed, its wooden door weathered and creaky. It looked exactly how I remembered it, dusty, neglected, and forgotten. With a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped inside. The shed was dimly lit, and the smell of old hay and rusted metal filled the air. Tools were scattered around, covered in a layer of dust. As I moved deeper into the shed, I noticed a small door at the back. It was partially hidden behind a pile of old machinery. My curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed aside the machinery to reveal the hidden door. It was locked, but I noticed a rusty key hanging on a hook nearby. My heart raced as I unlocked the door and opened it. Inside was a cramped space with a large safe in the corner. My pulse quickened. Could this be what I had been hoping for? After finding the hidden door and unlocking the safe, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The small room was dim, but I could see the safe clearly, a heavy, old model, its surface scratched and worn. My hands trembled as I turned the handle. The safe creaked open, and inside were neatly arranged boxes and a few velvet-lined cases. I opened the first box and my eyes widened. It was filled with expensive-looking watches. There were several of them, each one glimmering under the weak light of the shed. I recognized some of them. They were part of my father's collection. My heart raced as I realized their potential value. These weren't just old trinkets. They could be worth a significant amount of money. I knew I had to handle this carefully. The inheritance dispute with Sophia was far from over, and the discovery of these watches could change everything. I took photos of each watch and carefully packed them back into the safe. I needed to consult professionals to understand their worth and the best way to handle the situation. When I returned to the house, Tom was waiting anxiously. He could tell by my expression that something important had happened. "What did you find?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I found a safe in the shed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's filled with watches. I think they might be worth a lot." Tom's eyes widened. "That's incredible. But what now?" "I'm going to consult a lawyer and an accountant," I said. "We need to handle this properly. There's a lot at stake here." Over the next few days, I met with James, the lawyer who had handled our father's will. I showed him the photos of the watches and explained the situation. James examined the photos carefully. "These are indeed valuable. Your father had quite an impressive collection." I'd suggest getting them appraised by a professional to determine their exact worth. I nodded, feeling a surge of hope. What about the inheritance tax and dividing the watches? James thought for a moment. Once we have an appraisal, we can figure out the tax implications. It might be best to sell some of the watches to cover those expenses and then distribute the rest according to the will. I followed his advice and hired an appraiser to evaluate the watches. When the results came in, I was stunned. The collection was worth at least $600,000, far more than I had anticipated. I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as I realized the true extent of our inheritance. The next step was to handle the taxes. I consulted an accountant to ensure everything was in order. The process was complicated and stressful, but I was determined to get it right. I also decided to sell a portion of the watches to cover the taxes and set aside some money for the relatives who had supported us during this difficult time. I kept one watch, a beautiful pocket watch that had belonged to my father, for sentimental reasons. News of the gift cards I sent out to relatives soon reached Sophia. I had hoped to keep things amicable, but Sophia's reaction was anything but friendly. She called me one evening, her voice icy and demanding. "Emma, I heard about the gift cards," she said. "What's going on?" "I'm just trying to do the right thing," I said. "I found some valuable watches in the shed. I'm dealing with everything according to the will." Sophia's tone grew sharper. "So you're hiding a windfall and trying to make it look like charity." "I'm not stupid, Emma." "I'm not hiding anything," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm just trying to handle this the best way I can. The watches are worth a lot, and I'm making sure everything is taken care of." Sophia's anger was palpable. "You're just trying to undermine me. I'm coming over to sort this out." I hung up the phone, my heart pounding. I knew Sophia's behavior was driven by her own greed and financial troubles. Her lavish lifestyle in New York City came with its own set of pressures, and I suspected she was desperate for money. The next day, I continued working on sorting out the inheritance. Tom and I decided to focus on our future and prepare for the arrival of our baby. Despite the ongoing tension with Sophia, we tried to stay positive. I felt a sense of accomplishment knowing that I was managing everything responsibly, even if it meant facing Sophia's anger. Little did I know, Sophia's desperation was about to lead her down a dangerous path. The days following our last conversation were tense. Sophia's anger was palpable, and I knew she was getting increasingly frustrated. Despite my attempts to reassure her, her mood only seemed to darken. Her phone calls were becoming more frequent and accusatory, filled with demands for explanations and threats. One evening, just as Tom and I were finishing dinner, the phone rang. It was Sophia again. I answered with a sigh, trying to sound as calm as possible. "Emma, I'm coming over," she said without preamble. "I need to see the safe and find out what you're hiding." "Sophia, this isn't necessary," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Everything is being handled according to the will. We're just following the legal process." "I don't care," she snapped. "I'm coming over to see it for myself." The call ended abruptly, and I felt a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. Tom looked at me, his concern evident. "What's going on?" "Sophia's coming over," I said. "She's convinced I'm hiding something from her." Tom nodded, his face grim. "We need to be careful. Her desperation might lead her to do something rash." That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining what Sophia might do. Her life in New York had been luxurious, but it came with its own set of problems. The pressure to maintain her high status had left her in a precarious financial situation. I feared she might be driven to take drastic measures. The next morning, as I was preparing breakfast, I heard a commotion outside. I peered out the window and saw Sophia's car parked in our driveway. My heart sank. She had arrived unannounced and was clearly agitated. "Emma, open the door," Sophia shouted from outside. Her voice was a mix of frustration and desperation. I hesitated for a moment, but then went to the door and opened it. Sophia pushed past me without waiting for an invitation. Her face was flushed, and her eyes were filled with a mix of anger and fear. "Where's the safe?" she demanded. "I want to see it now." "Sophia, this is not how we should handle this," I said, trying to remain calm. "We need to resolve this without escalating things." She ignored me and headed towards the shed. I followed her, feeling a wave of dread wash over me. Tom stayed behind, trying to stay out of the confrontation. In the shed, Sophia's eyes darted around until she spotted the safe. She moved towards it with purpose, her hands shaking. "I knew you were hiding something. I want to see it now." "Sophia, stop," I said, reaching out to stop her. "This isn't going to help. You're just making things worse." But Sophia was beyond reason. She fumbled with the safe's handle, her frustration growing. In her panic, she knocked over a stack of old farming tools. The noise was loud, and it echoed through the shed. Suddenly, I heard a faint voice calling from the house. It was our mother, calling to see what was happening. I turned to look, but when I turned back, Sophia was frantically trying to open the safe. Just then, I heard a loud crash followed by a cry of pain. Sophia had toppled over the safe, and it had landed on her leg. She cried out in agony as she tried to move. I rushed to her side, but it was clear that she was hurt badly. "Mom, call the police," I shouted, trying to stay calm. "Sophia's injured." Our mother, having heard the commotion, appeared in the doorway of the shed, her face pale. She hurried back to the house to call for help. I knelt beside Sophia, trying to comfort her despite my own fear. The police arrived quickly, followed by an ambulance. Sophia was in severe pain, and the paramedics worked to get her safely onto a stretcher. I watched helplessly as they loaded her into the ambulance and drove away. Tom and I were left alone, the reality of the situation sinking in. Sophia's reckless actions had led to her injury and a police involvement. We were both shaken, but we knew we had to deal with the aftermath. Later that evening, as we were cleaning up the shed, our mother came to sit with us. Her face was lined with worry and fatigue. "I'm so sorry this happened," she said softly. "I didn't want things to end up like this." "It's not your fault, Mom," I said. "Sophia made her own choices. We just have to focus on moving forward and making sure everything is taken care of properly." Tom nodded in agreement. "We need to be prepared for what might come next. Sophia's actions might have serious consequences." As we sat together in the quiet of the evening, I reflected on the events of the day. Sophia's desperation had led her to make a dangerous gamble, and it had cost her dearly. I hoped that with time, she would come to understand the consequences of her actions and find a way to rebuild her life. But for now, Tom and I had to focus on our own future and prepare for the arrival of our baby. The ordeal with Sophia had been a harsh reminder of how easily family bonds could be tested. As the days turned into weeks, the chaos of the past few months began to settle. Sophia's injury had been severe, and her stay in the hospital was extended due to complications. It was clear that her actions had not only hurt her physically, but had also deepened the rift between us. Tom and I had settled into a routine of caring for our mother, preparing for the arrival of our baby, and managing the aftermath of the inheritance discovery. The shed was now neatly organized, and the safe's contents were safely stored in a secure location. We had taken care of the inheritance taxes and made sure everything was handled according to the law. One afternoon, as I was organizing baby clothes in the nursery, my phone rang. It was Sophia. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Emma," she said, her voice sounding weary. "I wanted to talk." I took a deep breath. "Okay, Sophia. What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," she began. I realize now that I let my greed and desperation get the better of me. I'm sorry for what I did. Her apology was unexpected. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, and it was clear that she had been through a lot. Sophia, I appreciate your apology. It's been a difficult time for all of us. What's important now is how we move forward. I know, she said. Tom and I have been talking, and he's decided to file for divorce. He can't handle the stress and the lies anymore. I'm left with the consequences of my actions, and it's more than I can bear alone. I felt a pang of sympathy. Despite everything that had happened, I couldn't ignore the fact that Sophia was still my sister. I'm sorry to hear that, Sophia. I hope you find a way to heal and rebuild your life. Thank you, she replied. I'm coming back to Kansas to see Mom and you. I want to make amends if you'll have me. When Sophia arrived a few days later, the atmosphere in the house was tense but hopeful. She had a visible limp and looked worn out, but there was a determination in her eyes. Our mother greeted her with a mixture of relief and caution. I'm here to make things right, Sophia said as she entered the house. I know I've caused a lot of pain, and I want to do whatever I can to make amends. I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. We all need to work through this, Sophia. We've had a lot of changes in our lives, and it's important that we support each other. The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations and healing. Sophia spent time with our mother, helping around the house and sharing stories of her time in New York. It was clear that she was genuinely trying to make up for her mistakes, though the process was slow and fraught with lingering tension. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Sophia handed me a small package. I wanted to give you something, she said. It's a token of my apology and a symbol of my commitment to making things right. I opened the package to find a beautiful pocket watch, similar to the ones I had sold. It was intricately designed and had a note attached. The note read, "For Emma, with love and regret. May this remind you of the importance of family and the power of forgiveness." Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at the watch. Thank you, Sophia. This means a lot to me. Sophia smiled, a look of relief on her face. I'm glad. I want us to heal and move forward. I know it will take time, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. As the weeks went by, things slowly began to return to a new normal. Sophia's presence brought a renewed sense of hope and reconciliation. Tom and I continued to prepare for our baby's arrival, and we found comfort in the support of our family. The final turning point came when Sophia and I sat together in the garden, watching the sun set over the fields. It was a moment of quiet reflection and mutual understanding. I wish Dad could have seen us together like this, Sophia said softly. I think he would be proud of how we're working through everything. I think so too, I replied. It's been a tough journey, but we're finding our way, and that's what matters. With the birth of our baby, life took on a new dimension. The challenges we faced had brought us closer together, and the lessons learned from the inheritance dispute had strengthened our bonds. As we welcomed our child into the world, we did so with a renewed sense of family and hope for the future. The story of our father's legacy had ended in unexpected ways, but it had also opened doors to healing and reconciliation. Despite the pain and the struggle, we emerged stronger, more understanding, and ready to embrace the new beginnings that awaited us. I never imagined that my life would be turned upside down like this. My name is Nina, and I'm a 38-year-old nurse living in Austin, Texas. It's been a whirlwind of emotions over the past few weeks, and I find myself compelled to share my story. I need to make sense of it all, if that's even possible. It started with an email, just an email. Mark, my husband of 15 years, a freelance graphic designer, had always been somewhat unpredictable. But nothing could have prepared me for the cold, detached message he sent. He wrote that he had fallen in love with someone else and was leaving us, Me and our 12-year-old daughter, Sophia. His words cut deep. I'm starting a new life with her. I'm taking the car. You'll need to deal with the debt. The car in question wasn't just any car. It was a luxury vehicle we had bought on loan in my name. We had taken out a $40,000 loan to get it, hoping it would bring some excitement into our lives. Now, it seemed to symbolize everything that had gone wrong. I was left with the burden of repaying the debt, while Mark, it seemed, would drive away with the one thing I had hoped would make our lives better. I remember the shock washing over me like a tidal wave. My mind raced. How could he do this to us? I tried calling him, sending texts, even reaching out to mutual friends, but he was nowhere to be found. Every attempt to contact him was met with silence. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving only his betrayal behind. To make matters worse, I discovered that the divorce papers we had discussed during one of our more heated arguments were missing. I had been so focused on trying to keep our family together, trying to make things work, that I had put off dealing with those papers. Now, it seemed Mark had taken them, perhaps as part of his departure, leaving me not only heartbroken but also financially strained. Sophia, my bright and observant daughter, noticed that something was wrong. She'd always been perceptive for her age, and I knew I couldn't hide the truth from her forever. She saw the sleepless nights and the growing stress etched on my face. One evening, she approached me with that look of concern only a child who truly cares can muster. "Mom, where's Dad? Why isn't he coming back?" The moment those words left her lips, I felt my heart crack a little more. I sat her down and told her everything. I explained how Mark had left us and how we were in a difficult situation, both emotionally and financially. Her response surprised me. She took it remarkably well, as if she had been expecting it all along. She remained calm, her maturity in the face of this crisis both comforting and heartbreaking. I tried to hold myself together for Sophia's sake, but the weight of everything was crushing me. My work as a nurse, which had always been a source of pride and purpose, started to feel like an unbearable burden. One day, while I was at the hospital, the stress became too much. I collapsed in the break room, my vision blurring, my heart racing. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and nurses. They told me I needed immediate surgery for a serious illness that had been exacerbated by my stress. As I lay there recovering, I faced another blow. I checked my savings account and found that the $25,000 I had diligently saved was now reduced to a mere $42.10. Mark had withdrawn every last penny without my knowledge. It was a cruel blow, making me feel even more helpless. But Sophia, even in her young age, was not one to be easily defeated. Determined to support me, she came up with a plan. She suggested we use a GPS app on our phones to track down Mark. Her idea was simple yet brilliant, and it gave me a sliver of hope. Together, we began to take action. Sophia's resourcefulness and quick thinking were astonishing, and they provided me with a renewed sense of determination. 3 days later, Mark contacted me, pleading for help. He was being questioned by the police about the stolen luxury car. The irony of it all was not lost on me. With Sophia by my side, I agreed to meet him at a nearby forest park where he had been camping. Lydia, Mark's mistress, was with him, her presence adding another layer of complexity to an already fraught situation. Meeting Mark at the forest park was a surreal experience. The park's serene surroundings felt like a cruel contrast to the chaos that had enveloped my life. As Sophia and I approached the meeting spot, I could see Mark's luxury car parked under the shade of tall trees, its gleaming surface now a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. Lydia, Mark's mistress, was beside him. The tension in the air was palpable. Sophia, ever the observant one, squeezed my hand for reassurance. Her courage in this whole ordeal had been a constant source of strength for me. I took a deep breath and walked toward Mark, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Mark," I said, my voice steady but firm, "I've come to get the car back and the money you stole." Mark looked disheveled and worn, a stark contrast to the confident image he had always projected. His eyes darted nervously between Sophia and me. "Nina, please, let's just talk," he said, his voice lacking the authority it once had. Lydia, standing beside him with an air of indifference, crossed her arms and watched the exchange with an almost casual disdain. "You don't need to be so confrontational, Nina," she said with a smirk. "Mark's left you, and you should just accept it." I could barely contain my anger. "Accept it?" I shot back. "You have no idea what it's like to be left in the lurch, burdened with debt and stolen money. And you, Lydia, are you really that smug?" Sophia, despite her young age, decided to step in. "Why did you leave us, Dad?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with hurt. "Why did you take everything and leave Mom in such a bad situation?" Mark seemed taken aback by Sophia's directness. "Sophia, honey, it's complicated," he stammered, trying to avoid her gaze. "I made mistakes, and I'm sorry for that." Lydia, clearly feeling defensive, interjected. "Mark left because he was unhappy. And I'm here now. He chose me because I'm better for him." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Better? You mean to tell me you're okay with what he did to us? Leaving us without a penny and taking our car?" The confrontation was heating up. Mark's face grew red, and he turned to Lydia, his frustration evident. "Lydia, this isn't helping," he said, his voice rising. "I made mistakes, but I didn't expect things to spiral out of control like this." At that moment, I revealed the card I had up my sleeve. I had already contacted Lydia's parents, hoping they would provide some accountability. They arrived at the scene, visibly angry and disapproving. Lydia's mother and father marched up to their daughter, their faces flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Lydia," her mother exclaimed, her voice cracking with disappointment. "How could you be involved in something like this? Look at the mess you've caused." Lydia's father added, "Mark, we trusted you. We thought you were a decent man. How could you do this?" The public shaming seemed to get under Mark's skin. The atmosphere was charged, and it became clear that Mark was feeling the full weight of his actions. Lydia's parents demanded explanations, and Mark, clearly rattled, started to falter under their scrutiny. Just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get any more chaotic, the turning point arrived. Mark received a phone call that would shift the dynamics of the encounter. Lydia's pregnancy had been a topic of gossip, but now it was about to become central to the confrontation. Mark's face turned ashen as he listened to the caller. He turned to Lydia, his voice trembling. "The baby is not mine, is it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lydia's face fell. The truth about the pregnancy, which had been a source of tension and speculation, was now out in the open. Lydia's face turned pale as she struggled to respond. "Mark, I didn't mean for it to come out like this," she stammered. The realization hit Mark like a freight train. The child Lydia was carrying wasn't his, and the timeline didn't match up with their relationship. It was clear that Mark had been deceived, and the magnitude of his betrayal began to sink in. His face twisted in shock and anger, and he started to confront Lydia about the lies. "You lied to me about everything," Mark said, his voice breaking. "How could you?" The argument escalated quickly, with accusations flying in every direction. Lydia's parents were now fully involved, demanding answers and making it clear that they were ashamed of their daughter's actions. Mark and Lydia's argument grew louder, drawing the attention of parkgoers who were now witnessing the public unraveling of their lives. As the confrontation reached its peak, police officers arrived at the scene, summoned by the commotion. They began to question everyone involved. It was clear that this was no longer just a family dispute. It had become a matter of legal concern. In the chaos, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. Mark and Lydia's fate was now in the hands of the authorities. The stolen car and the missing money were not just personal grievances anymore. They were legal issues that needed to be resolved. I knew this was only the beginning of a long road ahead. Sophia, though shaken, stood by my side. Her bravery and determination had been a beacon of strength throughout this ordeal. As we prepared to face whatever came next, I knew that the journey was far from over. But at that moment, amidst the confusion and upheaval, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The first step toward reclaiming our lives had been taken. The aftermath of the confrontation at the park was both chaotic and revealing. With Mark and Lydia in police custody, Sophia and I found ourselves in the midst of a whirlwind of legal and emotional turmoil. The park, once a place of serenity, had become a symbol of our shattered lives. In the following days, I busied myself with filing reports for the stolen luxury car and the missing money. The police were efficient, but the process was grueling. Every detail had to be documented, every piece of evidence presented. I felt overwhelmed but knew that we had to move forward, for Sophia's sake and mine. Mark's legal troubles were extensive. The theft of the car and the money had serious repercussions. Lydia's betrayal, coupled with the revelation of her pregnancy, compounded the mess. Mark was charged with theft and fraud, and the legal system began to take its course. I had to prepare myself for a courtroom battle that I had never imagined I would face. Sophia, despite her age, showed remarkable resilience. She took on more responsibilities at home, helping with chores and staying on top of her schoolwork. Her maturity in handling the situation was a constant source of inspiration for me. Whenever I felt overwhelmed, her calm and composed demeanor reminded me of why we had to fight through this. One afternoon, as I was sorting through paperwork related to the case, the phone rang. It was my lawyer with news that Mark had reached out, asking for a settlement. He was willing to return the stolen car and some of the money. The offer, though a relief, was a reminder of the complications ahead. Mark's attempt to make amends was a small step, but didn't erase the emotional and financial damage he had caused. Sophia and I discussed the offer. She was cautious but hopeful. "Mom, do you think it's enough?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. "I don't know, honey," I admitted. "But it's a start. We have to see this through." The day of the court hearing arrived, and the courtroom was packed. Mark and Lydia were present, their faces a mix of shame and defiance. As the proceedings began, I felt a wave of anxiety, but also a sense of determination. The truth of what had happened was laid bare, and the courtroom was filled with the raw emotions of everyone involved. Mark was ordered to pay $25,000 in damages and $600 per month in child support for Sophia. The court also ruled that the stolen car should be returned to me, and I could use the proceeds from its sale to help clear the auto loan. The judgment felt like a small victory, but it was bittersweet. The financial relief was significant, but the emotional scars were still fresh. As I left the courthouse, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The legal battle was over, but the journey to rebuild our lives was just beginning. Sophia and I had to focus on healing and moving forward. In the days that followed, I sold the luxury car to settle the remaining debt. The process was straightforward, but it symbolized the end of a chapter and the beginning of a new one. I also focused on regaining my health, which had suffered during this ordeal. The stress and strain had taken a toll, but with Sophia's support and the resolution of our legal issues, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Sophia continued to excel in her studies and helped out around the house. Her resilience had been a guiding light throughout this challenging period. We slowly began to rebuild our lives, taking each day as it came. The The support from friends and family also played a crucial role in our recovery. As we looked ahead, we knew that the scars of the past would remain, but we were determined to build a brighter future. The strength of our bond and our ability to face adversity together gave us the courage to move forward. The road to healing was long, but with each step, we grew stronger. In the end, it was clear that betrayal had tested us, but our resilience and the strength of our family had seen us through. The journey had been arduous, but Sophia and I emerged from it with a renewed sense of purpose and a commitment to creating a new, hopeful chapter in our lives. The months following the court case were filled with a mix of healing and rebuilding. Life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the echoes of our past troubles were never far from our minds. Sophia and I continued to adjust to our new reality, finding strength in our bond and in the support we received from those around us. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sophia joined me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, do you ever think about what we've been through?" she asked quietly. I looked at her, seeing the mature young woman she was becoming. "Yes, Sophia, I think about it often," I replied. "But I also think about how far we've come. We faced a lot, but we faced it together." Sophia nodded. "It's strange to think that things could have been so different. But I'm glad we have each other." Her words were a reminder of how important our relationship had become through this ordeal. Despite everything, we had grown closer and learned to appreciate each other more deeply. In the weeks that followed, I focused on my recovery and on making our home a place of comfort and stability. The sale of the luxury car had cleared the remaining debt, and I was able to breathe a little easier financially. My health improved as I dedicated time to self-care and rebuilding my strength. Sophia's academic success continued to shine. She excelled in her studies, and her teachers praised her resilience and dedication. I was incredibly proud of her achievements, which seemed even more remarkable given the challenges she had faced. Her hard work and perseverance were a testament to her character. We started to make new plans for the future. With the debt cleared and a renewed sense of stability, I began considering how to create a positive and fulfilling life for us. We took small steps towards this new beginning, focusing on activities that brought us joy and relaxation. Weekend outings, family movie nights, and even a small vacation helped us rediscover the simple pleasures of life. One day, I received a letter from Mark's lawyer. It was a formal notice that Mark had fulfilled his financial obligations. The $600 monthly payments were set up, and while it wasn't a cure-all, it was a step towards ensuring Sophia's well-being. As I read the letter, I felt a sense of closure. The legal battles were behind us, and we could now focus on what truly mattered, our happiness and future. I shared the news with Sophia, who smiled with relief and contentment. In the end, our journey had been one of incredible hardship, but it was also one of growth and resilience. We had faced betrayal and adversity, but we had emerged stronger, with a renewed appreciation for the strength of our family bond. The support we received from friends, the legal resolution, and the commitment to rebuilding our lives had all contributed to our recovery. Sophia and I looked forward to the future with hope and optimism. The scars of the past would always be a part of us, but they no longer defined us. We were ready to embrace new opportunities and to continue building a life filled with love, trust, and joy. As we moved forward, we knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we had the strength to face them together. Our journey had taught us the importance of resilience, honesty, and the unwavering support of family. And with that knowledge, we stepped confidently into the future, ready to create new memories and to build a brighter, more hopeful life. My name is Anna, and I'm 27 years old. I've spent nearly my entire working life at the family company in Chicago, a business that my father built from the ground up. It's a company worth $200 million, a testament to his relentless work and vision. Growing up, I watched my father dedicate countless hours to the business, working late into the night and making sacrifices to ensure its success. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a pioneer who believed in the value of hard work and dedication. My parents always encouraged me to follow my own path. Despite their support for my independence, I felt a deep connection to the company. I wanted to be part of something that represented my father's dreams and efforts. So, after college, I chose to stay and contribute to the business rather than seek a career elsewhere. I was lucky to have Sam, a seasoned employee, as my mentor. Sam, who was likely in his mid-40s, had a wealth of experience and a patient demeanor that made him an ideal guide. He helped me understand the inner workings of the company, teaching me everything from the basics to the more complex aspects of running a $200 million enterprise. His mentorship was crucial in my development, and I took pride in learning every detail about the business. My older brother Jake, 29, had a different vision. He pursued a college education in management and always saw himself as the future president of the company. Jake's approach was less about dedication and more about entitlement. He viewed the company as his ticket to a life of luxury. His lifestyle reflected this attitude, expensive tastes, and a love for the high life. Jake married Lisa, a woman in her late 20s who shared his appreciation for opulence. Their home was a showcase of their wealth, and they were often seen at high-profile events, embodying the image of future success they aspired to. Our father's sudden passing was a shock to everyone. It was especially hard for me, as I had to cope with both the loss of my father and the responsibility of taking over the company. When the day of the will reading arrived, Jake and Lisa were away on vacation, enjoying their luxurious lifestyle while we dealt with the aftermath of our father's death. They returned just in time for the reading of the will. The atmosphere in the room was thick with anticipation. We gathered in the conference room, and Mr. Stevens, the family lawyer, prepared to read the will. Jake and Lisa arrived with an air of casual superiority, seemingly expecting the will to confirm Jake's ascension as the new president. Mr. Stevens began reading the will, and my heart pounded as I awaited the outcome. As per the wishes of John Thompson, Mr. Stevens announced the company, including all its assets, valued at $200 million, will be inherited by Anna Thompson. The room fell silent. Jake's face went pale, and Lisa's eyes widened in disbelief. The reality of the situation hit hard, and the room seemed to hold its breath as Jake and Lisa absorbed the news. "This can't be right," Jake finally said, his voice shaky. "I'm supposed to be the president. I've been preparing for this my entire life." Mr. Stevens remained calm. "The will is legally binding, Mr. Thompson. Your father's wishes were clear." Jake's disbelief turned into anger. My father must have been mistaken. How could he leave everything to Anna? She's never been involved in the high-level decisions. Lisa, standing by Jake's side, added angrily, "Anna? She's just a low-level employee compared to Jake. This isn't fair." The employees, including Sam, who had been quietly observing, exchanged knowing glances. They had seen my dedication and hard work over the years. Sam stepped forward to support me. "Anna has been here every day, learning and working alongside us. She's shown genuine commitment to the company. This decision reflects her true contributions and potential." Jake's anger flared. "This is ridiculous. I should be the one leading this company. It's my birthright." Lisa, clearly upset, added, "We should contest this will. This isn't right, and we won't accept it." Despite their protests, the will was clear. My father's decision was made, and it was now up to me to step into the role of president. The weight of this responsibility was heavy, but I was determined to honor my father's legacy and prove myself worthy of the trust he had placed in me. In the days that followed, I prepared to take on my new role while grappling with the emotional impact of losing my father. I had no idea that this was only the beginning of a challenging journey. The events that were about to unfold would reveal the true nature of those around me and test my resolve in ways I had never imagined. The days following the reading of the will were a whirlwind. Jake and Lisa's protests did little to change the situation. Despite their anger and disbelief, the will was legally binding, and I was officially named the president of the company. Jake, now ousted from his position, had to come to terms with the new reality. He and Lisa were forced to sell their mansion, a symbol of their extravagant lifestyle, to manage their finances. Watching Jake and Lisa's struggle was surreal. They had lived in such luxury, and now they were facing the harsh realities of their choices. Jake's arrogance had always shielded him from the real world, and Lisa's dependence on their high status left them both unprepared for the sudden shift. With no real skills or experience outside of their former life, Jake took a part-time job at a convenience store, while Lisa found work as a cashier at a supermarket. It was a stark contrast to their previous life, and their pride made the transition even harder. As for me, I was determined to prove myself. The transition wasn't easy, but I knew it was essential to keep the company on track. With Sam's guidance, I began to familiarize myself with the intricate details of running a $200 million enterprise. Sam continued to be an invaluable mentor, helping me navigate the complexities of the business and the challenges that came with my new role. The company, despite its success, was not without its issues. There were long-standing problems and areas for improvement that needed immediate attention. I spent countless hours reviewing financial reports, meeting with department heads, and making decisions that would impact the future of the business. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but I was committed to honoring my father's legacy. One of the first things I did was address the concerns of the employees. They had been with the company through thick and thin, and their support was crucial. I called a meeting to reassure them of my commitment to the company and to listen to their feedback. "Thank you all for coming," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know the past few weeks have been difficult, and I want you to know that I'm here to support the company and all of you. My father's vision was for this company to thrive, and I intend to see that vision fulfilled." The employees seemed receptive, and Sam gave me a reassuring nod. Their support was something I valued deeply, and I made it a point to foster a positive working environment. I wanted to create a culture where hard work and dedication were recognized and rewarded. Despite my efforts, Jake and Lisa's presence lingered in my mind. Their situation was a stark reminder of the consequences of entitlement and arrogance. I had always believed in earning one's place through hard work and respect for others, and the contrast between my approach and Jake's became even more apparent. Jake had always felt that the company was his by right, while I had worked tirelessly to understand and contribute to its success. One day, as I was going through some old documents, I found a letter from my father. It was a note of encouragement and advice, written shortly before his passing. In it, he spoke about the values he hoped I would carry forward: integrity, dedication, and respect. Reading his words gave me strength and reminded me of the responsibility I had inherited. The letter ended with a simple message: "Anna, remember that true leadership comes from within. It's not about what you're given, but what you choose to do with it. Lead with your heart and honor the legacy we've built together." I kept the letter in a frame on my desk as a daily reminder of my father's words. Each decision I made, each challenge I faced, was guided by his advice. I wanted to lead in a way that would make him proud and uphold the values he had instilled in me. As time went on, the company began to show signs of recovery and growth. The efforts I had put in started to pay off, and the unity among the employees strengthened. The transition was far from easy, but with perseverance and a focus on genuine effort, I was beginning to see the fruits of my labor. However, the shadow of Jake and Lisa's downfall remained. I knew that their story was a cautionary tale of what happens when entitlement outweighs hard work. It was a stark reminder of the importance of humility and respect, values that I had embraced wholeheartedly. The journey had just begun, and there were many challenges ahead. I was determined to face them head-on, guided by my father's legacy and the support of those who truly believed in the company's future. Little did I know, the path ahead would test me in ways I couldn't yet imagine, revealing the true character of everyone involved and shaping the future of the company in ways I could only hope for. Months passed, and life at the company began to settle into a new rhythm. We were making progress, and I felt more confident in my role. The company was regaining its footing, and our efforts were starting to show. But in the midst of our successes, Jake and Lisa's struggle was a constant reminder of how their sense of entitlement had led to their downfall. I still heard occasional snippets about Jake's situation through mutual acquaintances. The news was often grim. Jake's job at the convenience store was menial compared to the high status he once enjoyed. Lisa, too, faced challenges working as a cashier, a role far removed from the luxurious lifestyle she had been accustomed to. Their pride made it difficult for them to openly discuss their difficulties, but it was evident that their lives had been turned upside down. One afternoon, I received a call from Sam. "Anna, I think you should come by the office early tomorrow. We need to discuss some issues that have come up." The tone of his voice was serious, and I could tell it was something important. I agreed to meet him, and the next morning, I arrived at the office early. Sam was already there, waiting in his office. "Good morning, Anna," Sam said, motioning for me to sit down. "We've been having some issues with one of our major clients. They're considering pulling their account due to some unresolved problems." I listened intently as Sam outlined the situation. The client's dissatisfaction was largely due to some lapses in our service, which had happened before I took over. It was a critical account, and losing it would be a significant blow to the company. "We need to act quickly," Sam continued. "I've already scheduled a meeting with the client, but we need to come up with a plan to address their concerns and convince them to stay." I spent the rest of the day working on a strategy to save the account. It was a challenge, but I was determined to resolve the issue. By the end of the day, we had a comprehensive plan in place, and I felt confident about the upcoming meeting. The meeting with the client went well. I presented our plan and assured them that we were taking immediate action to address their concerns. After a tense discussion, they agreed to give us another chance. It was a relief and a testament to the hard work of everyone involved. As the days went by, the company continued to improve. We were regaining lost ground and building a stronger foundation for the future. But despite the progress, Jake and Lisa's situation weighed heavily on my mind. Their story was a painful reminder of the consequences of entitlement and arrogance. One evening, I received an unexpected visitor at the office. Jake, looking weary and disheveled, stood at the door. I was taken aback. "Anna," he said, his voice tinged with frustration and desperation. "Can we talk?" I nodded and invited him in. We sat in my office, and he began to speak, his tone a mix of bitterness and resignation. "I didn't think it would be this hard," Jake admitted. "Lisa and I thought we could get by on our past status, but we were wrong. It's been a tough road, and I'm struggling to find a way back." I listened, trying to understand his perspective. "Jake, you've always believed that the company was your right. But it wasn't just about the position. It was about the work and respect that come with it. Entitlement doesn't lead to success. Hard work and humility do." Jake's face showed a flicker of realization, but he didn't respond immediately. "I know you're right," he finally said. I guess I didn't fully appreciate that until now. I've been trying to make sense of it all. We talked for a while longer. It was a difficult conversation, but it was clear that Jake was beginning to understand the importance of the values I had embraced. His journey was far from over, but perhaps there was a chance for him to rebuild, not just his life, but his understanding of what true success meant. As Jake left the office, I felt a mixture of emotions. It was hard to see him in such a state, but it was also a reminder of the importance of the path I had chosen. The contrast between our journeys was stark. While I worked hard to restore and build the company, Jake faced the harsh reality of his choices. The lessons from these experiences were becoming increasingly clear. True leadership and success come from genuine effort and respect for others, not from entitlement or a sense of inherited privilege. It was a painful but necessary lesson, and it was shaping both our lives in ways we hadn't anticipated. Little did I know, the challenges ahead would test these lessons even further, revealing more about our characters and the true nature of success. The months that followed Jake's visit were transformative for both him and me. While I continued to focus on strengthening the company, Jake and Lisa were slowly adjusting to their new reality. Their struggle was evident, but so was Jake's effort to learn from his past mistakes. One day, I received a call from Sam, who sounded unusually excited. "Anna, I think you should come to the office. There's something you need to see." When I arrived, Sam was waiting with a wide grin. "Look at this," he said, handing me a document. It was an article from a major business magazine featuring our company. The headline read, "Chicago's Resilient Business: How Dedication and Leadership Made a Difference." The article praised the company's turnaround under my leadership and highlighted the improvements we had made. It was a moment of pride and validation for all the hard work we had put in. As I read the article, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. The company, now valued at $200 million, was thriving and gaining recognition. The sense of accomplishment was immense, but it was also a reminder of the values that had guided us through tough times: humility, hard work, and respect. A few days later, I received a letter from Jake. In it, he expressed his regret for his past behavior and acknowledged the lessons he had learned. He wrote about his ongoing efforts to rebuild his life and find a new sense of purpose. "I've come to understand that success isn't just about a title or wealth," he wrote. "It's about the work you put in and the respect you earn along the way. I'm learning that now, and I wanted to thank you for showing me that." The letter was heartfelt, and it was clear that Jake was making an effort to change his perspective. It wasn't an easy road for him, but the acknowledgement of his mistakes and his willingness to learn were significant steps in the right direction. Life at the company continued to be fulfilling. With the support of Sam and the rest of the team, we had created a strong, cohesive environment where everyone felt valued. The challenges we faced had only strengthened our resolve and deepened our commitment to the values we believed in. Jake and Lisa's story was a poignant reminder of how entitlement and arrogance could lead to hardship, while genuine effort and humility paved the way to true success. Our paths had diverged significantly, but the lessons learned were invaluable. As I looked out from my office window, reflecting on the journey we had been through, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The company was thriving, my efforts had paid off, and the values of hard work and respect had guided us to success. Jake's journey was still unfolding, and while he faced his own challenges, it was clear that he was on a path of growth. Our stories were intertwined by the lessons we had learned and the contrasts that had shaped our lives. In the end, the true measure of success was not in the inheritance or the titles we held, but in the character we built and the impact we made. The story of our family and the company was a testament to the power of hard work, humility, and genuine leadership. "I have a new girlfriend," Jake said abruptly. She's moving in here with me, and I'm divorcing you. You'll have to go live with my parents. I stared at him, not comprehending. What are you talking about, Jake? I don't need you anymore, he continued coldly. You can stay with my parents if you want, either as their breadwinner or their housekeeper. They laugh at you behind your back, you know. They're awful people, but I think it's better this way. The shock and betrayal hit me like a tidal wave. But I knew, deep down, it was time for them all to leave. My name is Sarah, and I'm a 34-year-old software developer living in Chicago, Illinois. My life changed when I met Jake at a tech conference hosted by a mutual friend. Jake, 36, was charming, engaging, and we hit it off immediately. We spent the evening talking about our careers, our dreams, and everything in between. It wasn't long before Jake asked me out, and our relationship blossomed quickly. Jake was everything I had hoped for in a partner. He was supportive, kind, and always knew how to make me laugh. After a year of dating, Jake proposed, and I was over the moon. We got married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family. I felt like the luckiest woman alive. After our wedding, Jake introduced me to his parents. They were elderly, living on a modest pension, and seemed genuinely kind and supportive. They welcomed me with open arms, and I felt a sense of belonging with them. We visited them often, and I enjoyed their company. 9 months into our marriage, Jake brought up a concern. Sarah, my parents are getting older, and I'm worried about them living alone. What do you think about moving in with them? He asked one evening. I paused, considering his proposal. It would be a big change, but I understand your concern. How would we manage the space? Jake's face lit up. We could renovate their house to accommodate 2 families. It would be cheaper than buying a new house, and we'd still have our privacy. It sounded like a reasonable plan. Jake's parents were kind people, and I believed it could work. All right, let's do it, I agreed. But then Jake dropped a bombshell. There's something else I need to tell you. My parents are in debt, $200,000. They can't afford the renovation. I was stunned. How did that happen? Jake looked uncomfortable. It started small but grew over time. They need our help. Blinded by love and wanting to support my husband, I agreed to use my savings and future earnings to cover the costs. We'll get through this together, I assured him. We started the renovation, and I worked tirelessly to manage the finances and keep everything on track. Jake, however, didn't contribute financially as he had promised. When I questioned him, he always had an excuse, and my suspicions began to grow. Despite my doubts, I continued to work hard, believing I was doing the right thing for our family. One day, I came home early from work and overheard a conversation that changed everything. Jake and his parents were in the living room, and I couldn't believe what I heard. Once the debt is paid off, we can. Jake's voice trailed off as he noticed my presence. They quickly changed the subject, but the unease in the room was palpable. I felt a knot in my stomach, wondering what they were hiding. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of the shocking revelations to come. The conversation I overheard that day planted seeds of doubt in my mind. Jake and his parents had abruptly changed the subject when they noticed me, and their suspicious behavior didn't sit well with me. I decided to be more observant and cautious, but I continued with the renovation and debt repayments, determined to support my husband. Weeks passed, and I noticed Jake's reluctance to share financial details with me. Whenever I asked about his contribution to the renovation, he became evasive. One evening, as we were having dinner, I decided to confront him directly. Jake, we need to talk about our finances. I've been handling everything so far, but you haven't contributed as we agreed. What's going on? Jake looked uncomfortable. Sarah, my salary is just not enough to cover everything. I'm trying my best. I frowned. But you promised we would do this together. I can't carry this burden alone. He sighed. I know, and I'm sorry. I'll try to do better. His vague response did nothing to alleviate my concerns. I decided to take matters into my own hands and started looking into our joint finances more closely. To my shock, I discovered that Jake had been withdrawing money from our accounts without telling me. The amounts were substantial, and I had no idea where the money was going. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to come home early from work more often, hoping to catch Jake in the act. One fateful day, my suspicions were confirmed. As I quietly approached the house, I overheard Jake and his parents discussing their plans. You have to keep her in the dark a little longer, Jake's father said. Once the debt is paid off, we can kick her out and keep the house. Jake's mother laughed. She's such a fool, thinking we're all in this together. My heart raced as I listened. The man I loved and his parents were using me. They had no intention of keeping their promises. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal, but I knew I had to stay calm and think strategically. That night, I pretended everything was normal. I couldn't let Jake or his parents know that I was onto their scheme. Instead, I started planning my next moves. I consulted a lawyer in secret, gathering information about my rights and options. I also started setting aside money in a separate account, preparing for the day when I would need to make my escape. Over the next few months, I played the part of the unsuspecting wife while quietly working to protect myself. I managed to speed up the debt repayments using my savings, and I carefully documented every transaction. I also began researching the legal steps necessary to secure my assets and prepare for a divorce. Then, one evening, Jake approached me with a serious expression. Sarah, we need to talk. I feigned ignorance. Sure, what's on your mind? I've met someone else, he said bluntly. I'm in love with her, and I want a divorce. I need you to move in with my parents so I can live here with her. The audacity of his words stunned me, but I kept my composure. I see. When were you planning to tell me? Jake seemed relieved by my calm response. I thought now would be the right time. She's moving in next month. I nodded slowly. All right, Jake. I'll move out. But there's something you should know. He raised an eyebrow. What's that? I've been the one paying off your parents' debt, I said, my voice steady. The house is legally mine because I took over the mortgage. You and your parents need to leave. Jake's face paled. What are you talking about? I stood firm. I consulted a lawyer months ago. Everything is in my name. You have no right to this house. Jake was at a loss for words. But the debt? There's still $110,000 remaining, I said coldly. And that's your responsibility. I won't be paying it anymore. Jake's shock turned to anger. You can't do this. I already have, I replied, turning to walk away. I'll be serving you divorce papers soon. That night, I felt a sense of liberation. The betrayal had been painful, but I had taken control of my life. I wasn't the naive woman Jake and his parents thought I was. I had outsmarted them, and I was ready for the next chapter of my life. As I lay in bed, I knew the battle wasn't over yet. There would be legal battles and emotional turmoil ahead, but I was prepared. I had built a new foundation for myself, one that was strong and unshakable. And with every step I took, I moved closer to reclaiming my life and my dignity. The day after my confrontation with Jake, I moved quickly to secure my position. I filed for divorce and put the house on the market. My lawyer assured me that, given the circumstances, the court would likely favor my case. I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. As the days went by, Jake and his parents scrambled to figure out their next move. They had underestimated me, and now they were facing the consequences of their deceit. I could see the desperation in Jake's eyes whenever we crossed paths in the house. He tried to reason with me several times, but I remained firm in my decision. One evening, Jake approached me again, his demeanor more subdued than before. "Sarah, can't we work something out? We don't have to go through with the divorce." I looked at him, my resolve unwavering. "Jake, you betrayed my trust. You and your parents used me. There's no going back from that." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I was just trying to take care of them. They needed help. And I was willing to help," I replied. "But you took advantage of my kindness and love. You lied to me." Jake fell silent, knowing there was no way to justify his actions. I walked away, feeling a sense of closure. I had given him a chance to come clean, and he had chosen deceit instead. Now, it was time for me to move forward. With the house on the market, I focused on finding a new place to live. I wanted a fresh start, free from the memories of betrayal. My friends were incredibly supportive, offering their homes and advice as I navigated this difficult time. I found a cozy apartment downtown, perfect for starting anew. The day I moved out was bittersweet. I had put so much effort into making our house a home, and now I was leaving it behind. But I knew it was necessary for my healing and growth. As I packed my belongings, I found small reminders of happier times, photos, mementos, and gifts. I decided to leave most of them behind, wanting to let go of the past completely. For months after I filed for divorce, the court date arrived. Jake and his parents showed up, looking defeated. My lawyer presented our case clearly, highlighting the deceit and financial manipulation I had endured. The judge listened attentively, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. Jake's lawyer tried to paint a different picture, claiming that Jake had acted out of desperation and love for his parents. But the evidence was clear, and my lawyer's arguments were compelling. When it was my turn to speak, I told my story honestly and emotionally, laying bare the pain and betrayal I had experienced. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me the house and ordering Jake to pay alimony. His parents were left to deal with their remaining debt, a burden they had hoped to shift onto me. As I left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Justice had been served. I sold the house quickly, recovering a substantial amount of my investment. With the money, I paid off my remaining debts and invested in my future. I started taking night classes to advance my career, determined to build a life that was entirely my own. One day, as I was settling into my new apartment, I received a letter from Jake. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. Inside was a long, heartfelt apology. Jake admitted to his wrongdoings and expressed deep regret for how he had treated me. He asked for forgiveness, not expecting reconciliation but hoping for some semblance of peace between us. Reading his words, I felt a mixture of emotions. The pain of betrayal was still fresh, but I also saw a glimmer of sincerity in his apology. I decided to respond, acknowledging his letter and expressing my hope that he would learn from his mistakes. I didn't forgive him entirely, but I chose to let go of my anger. It was time to move on. As the weeks turned into months, I focused on rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and threw myself into my work and studies. The apartment began to feel like home, filled with new memories and experiences. I found joy in the small things, cooking a meal for myself, decorating my space, and exploring the city. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I reflected on my journey. The betrayal and deceit had been painful, but they had also taught me valuable lessons about resilience and self-worth. I had emerged stronger, more independent, and ready to face whatever the future held. Months passed, and life began to feel normal again. My apartment in downtown Chicago was now my sanctuary. I thrived in my career, excelling in my software development projects and enjoying the newfound freedom. My nights were filled with classes, helping me climb even higher in my field. One day, as I was walking home from work, I ran into an old friend, Emily. We decided to grab a coffee and catch up. As we talked, I realized how much I had missed genuine connections. Emily had always been a good listener, and as I shared my story, she was both shocked and supportive. "You've been through so much, Sarah," Emily said, shaking her head. "I'm glad you're doing well now. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Her words warmed my heart. It felt good to be understood and to reconnect with someone who truly cared. A few weeks later, I received a call from my lawyer. The divorce settlement was finalized, and the alimony from Jake was now officially in place. It was a significant amount, and knowing that Jake and his girlfriend would be contributing to my financial stability felt like poetic justice. However, the true victory was not the money. It was the sense of closure and empowerment. I had taken control of my life and emerged stronger than ever. The betrayal had been a harsh lesson, but it had also shown me my resilience. I decided it was time to focus on the future. With the settlement money, I invested in a small startup that had always intrigued me. The company, focusing on innovative tech solutions, had the potential to grow significantly. It was a risk, but I believed in their vision and my ability to make sound decisions. One afternoon, as I was working on a new project, I received a message from Jake. He wanted to meet and talk. After some contemplation, I agreed, curious to see what he had to say. We met at a small cafe, and Jake looked visibly different, humbled, perhaps. He started by apologizing again, more sincerely this time. "Sarah, I know I hurt you deeply, and I can't change the past. I just wanted to say that I'm truly sorry." I nodded, appreciating his words. "Jake, I accept your apology. I've moved on, and I hope you can too. We both need to learn from this and be better." As I left the cafe, I felt a sense of relief. It was the final piece of closure I needed. Forgiving Jake didn't mean forgetting the betrayal, but it allowed me to let go of any lingering resentment. With the past firmly behind me, I embraced my new life. My investments began to pay off, and the startup I believed in started gaining traction. Professionally and personally, I was in a better place than I had ever been. One evening, as I stood on my balcony watching the city lights, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been tumultuous, but it had led me to a place of strength and independence. I had learned to trust myself and to value my worth. The future was bright, filled with possibilities. I was ready to face whatever came my way, knowing that I had the resilience and wisdom to navigate life's challenges. My story was one of betrayal and deceit, but it was also one of triumph and empowerment. I had reclaimed my life, and with each new day, I continued to build the future I deserved. The night air was biting as I stumbled up the snowy driveway, clutching my baby tightly against my chest. Denver's winter was relentless, and I was barely dressed for it, my clothes in tatters and soaked through. The cold pierced me to my bones, but the thought of finding refuge drove me on, step by painful step. My baby, wrapped in a thin blanket, was my only source of warmth and comfort. I reached the front door of my brother Michael's house and knocked weakly. My hands were numb, and my vision was blurred by tears and frost. I could hardly believe I had made it this far. The door swung open, and Michael, my older brother, stood there, his face registering shock and concern. "Carol," he exclaimed, his voice a mix of disbelief and worry. "What's happened to you?" Before he could say more, I collapsed into his arms, my strength gone. Michael quickly pulled me inside, his expression turning from shock to deep concern. He led me to the living room, where a fire crackled in the fireplace, its warmth a stark contrast to the bitter cold outside. I sank into a chair, and Michael draped a thick, cozy blanket around me. Even so, I couldn't stop shaking. "Who did this to you?" Michael's voice was tight with anger and concern. His eyes fell on the baby, peacefully sleeping despite the chaos. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. It's a long story, Michael. I need to tell you everything. Michael sat down next to me, his face softening with empathy. Go ahead, he encouraged gently. I nodded, my mind racing back through the painful events. You remember when we lost Mom and Dad in that car crash? I was just 5 and you were 10. I began. Michael's eyes clouded with the memory. You stepped up as my protector after that. I don't know how I would have survived without you. Michael's gaze was steady. I've always been here for you, Carol. We went to live with Grandma and Grandpa. I continued. They were well-known artists, and they took us in when everyone else turned us away. They gave us a stable home. You excelled in academics and sports, and eventually learned carpentry from Grandpa. I pursued a career as a schoolteacher. Life seemed good. Michael smiled faintly at the mention of our grandparents. You were always so driven. Then I met Tom, I said, my voice trembling with bitterness. He seemed charming at first, the son of a wealthy businessman. I thought I had finally found happiness. But things started to go wrong after we got married. Michael's face grew tense. What happened? I moved into Tom's family home, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Tom's mother, Evelyn, was a wealthy real estate investor. At first, she seemed welcoming, but it soon became clear that she despised me. She would belittle me and make me feel like an outsider. I paused, struggling to hold back tears. She wasn't just verbally abusive, she was physically abusive too. She'd pour boiling water on me, hide sharp objects in my food, and even tried to push me down the stairs once. Michael's eyes widened with anger. And Tom? Did he do anything to stop her? I shook my head. Tom started changing too. He became distant and harsh. His mother's influence made everything worse. He began to treat me like a servant. Michael's fists clenched in anger. I'm so sorry, Carol. What about your father-in-law? Wasn't he able to help? He was ill, I explained. He tried to defend me, but he was too frail. He told me to hang in there, but things just got worse. Tell me more, Michael urged, his voice full of concern. I took another deep breath. Tom's hostility grew, and I was pushed to the breaking point. I was reduced to a housekeeper, enduring constant mistreatment. One night, I knew I couldn't stay any longer. I grabbed my baby, took what little I could, and ran. I had to leave. My father-in-law gave me some money before I left, and I took a cab here. Michael's face was a mix of shock and rage. You're safe now, Carol. We'll figure out what to do next. I nodded, feeling a small glimmer of hope amidst the despair. Michael's support was like a lifeline, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like there was a chance for things to get better. Michael and I sat by the fire for a while, the crackling flames a soothing backdrop to the unsettling silence. My baby slept peacefully in a makeshift crib Michael had quickly set up. I stared into the fire, trying to gather the strength to continue my story. Michael broke the silence first. Carol, what happened next? After you left Tom? I took a deep breath, the memories still painful. It was a hard decision, but I knew I couldn't stay there anymore. Tom's behavior had become unbearable. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. Michael nodded, his face a mask of anger and concern. You mentioned before that Tom's family was wealthy and influential. How did they handle your departure? That's just it, I said, my voice trembling. Tom's family wielded a lot of power. His mother, Evelyn, had this facade of sophistication, but behind closed doors, she was a tyrant. She made it clear that she expected me to serve her, and Tom, too, started treating me more like a servant than a wife. Michael leaned forward, his expression intense. Did anyone try to help you? Or was it just you against them? My father-in-law tried to help, I said, my voice breaking. But he was sick and couldn't do much. He'd tell me to stay strong, but his own health was deteriorating. He was the only one in Tom's family who showed me any kindness. Michael's face softened with sympathy. I'm sorry, Carol. I can't believe they treated you this way. I wiped away a tear, trying to focus. Things took a turn for the worse when Evelyn started using her wealth and influence to isolate me. She manipulated Tom into believing that I was the problem. He became increasingly abusive, both emotionally and physically. I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to avoid his anger. Michael's jaw tightened. That sounds like a nightmare. How did you manage to get out? I didn't have many options, I admitted. One night, after a particularly brutal confrontation, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a few things and took my baby. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to leave. My father-in-law gave me some money, but it was barely enough. I caught a cab to the bus station and headed here. Michael's eyes were full of determination. You're safe now, Carol. We'll figure out how to handle this. I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. But there's more. After I left, I had to start over from scratch. I was exhausted and scared, but I was determined to build a better life for my baby. Michael looked at me with a mix of admiration and concern. I can't believe you went through all that. You're incredibly brave. I managed a weak smile. I didn't have much choice. I had to be strong for my baby. Michael paused, considering what I'd said. Have you thought about what comes next? How are we going to address this situation with Tom and his family? I sighed. I've been thinking about it. I know I need to take legal action. I can't let them get away with what they did. My father-in-law secretly recorded some of the abuse. I plan to use that evidence in court. Michael's eyes lit up with a mixture of hope and determination. That's a good start. And you don't have to do this alone. I've been studying law, and I can help you with the legal aspects. We'll get through this together. I felt a flicker of hope. Thank you, Michael. I don't know what I'd do without your support. Michael placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. We're family, Carol. We'll face this challenge together. It's time to fight back. As the evening wore on, the warmth of the fire seemed to melt away some of my fears. Michael's support was a lifeline, and I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the darkness I had been trapped in for so long. But the road ahead was still uncertain, and I knew that confronting Tom and his family would be a long and difficult journey. For now, though, I took solace in the fact that I wasn't alone. With Michael's help, I felt a renewed sense of determination to reclaim my life and secure a better future for my baby. With Michael's support, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We spent the next few days in a whirlwind of activity, gathering evidence, preparing for legal battles, and trying to make sense of everything. It was a busy but necessary time. Michael and I were determined to confront Tom and his family and to seek justice for the abuse I had endured. One evening, as we sat in Michael's cozy living room, I reviewed the recordings my father-in-law had secretly made. They were heart-wrenching, moments of verbal abuse, threats, and manipulative tactics used by Evelyn. I could barely listen to them without feeling the weight of the past pressing down on me. Michael's face was grim as he listened to the recordings. This is serious evidence, Carol. We can use this to build a strong case. But we need to be careful about how we handle it. I nodded, trying to hold back tears. I just want to make sure they're held accountable for what they've done. Michael looked at me with resolve. We'll make sure they are. I've been working on filing the necessary documents and preparing for the legal proceedings. It won't be easy, but we have a solid case. The days turned into weeks as we prepared for the confrontation. The anticipation was nerve-wracking, but I found solace in Michael's unwavering support. He had become my rock through this turbulent time. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. I was nervous but determined. Michael and I arrived at the courthouse early, the weight of what lay ahead hanging heavily on our shoulders. As we walked through the corridors, I could hear the echo of our footsteps, a reminder of the gravity of the situation. The courtroom was intimidating, with its high ceilings and formal atmosphere. Evelyn and Tom were already there, looking composed, but I could sense their unease. The contrast between their facade and the turmoil inside me was stark. Michael and I sat at the plaintiff's table, and the proceedings began. Our lawyer presented the evidence, including the recordings, which caused a stir among the attendees. Evelyn tried to maintain her composure, but I could see the cracks forming in her veneer of control. Tom's face was a mask of anger and frustration, but he struggled to refute the evidence. As the trial progressed, the reality of the situation set in. The courtroom was a battlefield, and I was caught in the crossfire of a legal war. Michael was exceptional, cross-examining witnesses and presenting our case with conviction. His expertise and dedication were evident, and I felt a surge of gratitude for his support. Despite the tension, there were moments of hope. Evelyn's carefully crafted image started to crumble as the evidence mounted against her. The financial blow that had befallen her family due to the cancellation of the art gallery contract was a significant turning point. It was clear that her once unshakable position was weakening. As the final arguments were made, I felt a mix of hope and anxiety. The outcome of the case was still uncertain, but I knew that I had done everything in my power to fight for justice. The judge's decision came a few days later. The courtroom was packed with spectators, and I held my breath as the verdict was read. The judge ruled in my favor, granting the divorce and awarding me custody of my child. Evelyn and Tom were ordered to pay damages for their abuse and mistreatment. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I had fought a long and difficult battle, but it had been worth it. Michael and I embraced, tears of joy mingling with those of exhaustion. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. As we left the courthouse, the weight of the past seemed to lift slightly. Michael and I had taken a significant step towards reclaiming my life, and the support of my family had been invaluable. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I felt a renewed sense of hope. With the legal battle behind us, I could now focus on building a new life for myself and my child. The journey had been arduous, but the triumph of resilience and the importance of family support had shown through every challenge. The aftermath of the court proceedings was both a relief and a challenge. With the legal battles behind me, Michael and I turned our attention to rebuilding our lives. The road to recovery was not smooth, but each day brought us closer to a sense of normalcy. Michael and I spent the next few weeks settling into a routine. I moved into the guest house at our grandparents' estate, a cozy place that felt like a safe haven. It was comforting to be in a place that held so many positive memories from my childhood. The guest house had a warm, inviting atmosphere with its soft lighting and comfortable furniture. I set about making it feel like home for my child and me, filling it with toys, books, and the familiar sense of home-cooked meals. The first few nights were a whirlwind of emotions. My child, still adjusting to the new environment, clung to me with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. It was heartwarming to see them gradually grow comfortable in their new surroundings. Michael often stopped by to help, bringing meals and offering a listening ear whenever I needed it. I resumed my career as a schoolteacher, a move that felt both daunting and exhilarating. Returning to work was a step towards reclaiming my independence and finding a sense of normalcy. The transition was challenging, as I had to reestablish my routine and balance work with parenting. But with Michael's encouragement and support, I found the strength to persevere. The first day back in the classroom was a mix of nerves and excitement. I was greeted by my colleagues with warm smiles and supportive words. The students, too, were welcoming, and their eagerness to learn brought a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Every day at school was a reminder of why I had chosen this profession and why it mattered so much to me. Michael continued his carpentry work, and it was clear he found joy in his craft. He often talked about new projects and ideas, his enthusiasm evident. His support was unwavering, and he even began dating someone special, a kind woman who was understanding and supportive of his role in my life. Life at the estate slowly returned to a sense of routine. My child and I attended family dinners with Michael and our grandparents, where laughter and shared stories became a staple of our evenings. The bond between us grew stronger, and it was clear that the support of my family had been instrumental in navigating this challenging period. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Tom faced the consequences of their actions. Their once thriving real estate business crumbled under the weight of financial troubles and public scrutiny. The art gallery's decision to cancel their contract was a significant blow, and Evelyn's reputation suffered irreparable damage. It was clear that their once unassailable position had deteriorated significantly. The financial strain and personal turmoil took a toll on their relationship, leading to further complications in their lives. Tom, realizing that he no longer had control over his stepfather's assets, attempted to reconcile with me. He reached out, pleading for a fresh start. But after everything that had transpired, I found it impossible to forgive and forget. My focus was on healing and moving forward, not on reopening old wounds. Carol's father-in-law, who had discreetly supported me throughout the legal battle, eventually moved into an upscale assisted living facility. It was a bittersweet moment. His health had deteriorated, and though he had been a silent ally, his presence in my life had been significant. I visited him occasionally, ensuring he was comfortable and well cared for. As I looked back on everything that had happened, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been long and arduous, but the resilience I had discovered within myself and the unwavering support of my family had been the cornerstones of my recovery. Each day was a step towards a brighter future, and though the scars of the past remained, they were a testament to the strength and courage that had carried me through. The triumph of resilience and the importance of family support had never been more evident. As I walked through the peaceful gardens of the estate with my child by my side, I knew that I had emerged stronger and more determined than ever. The future was still uncertain, but with the love and support of those who mattered most, I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. In the end, the story was not just about overcoming adversity. It was about finding strength in the face of challenges and discovering the power of family to help heal and rebuild. The journey had been transformative, and as I looked forward to the future, I did so with hope, courage, and a renewed sense of purpose.